I represent the public's interest. The bad thing is that people who are politically inclined, who have been playing the game and will sell themselves out, tend to raise more money. We need more people in Sacramento who can buck a system, who represent the people, and who are truly about a community. And don't move around the musical chairs to run in a district simply because the powers that be have asked them to step down. People have asked me to step down because I haven't raised the money. And I'm going to tell you something. I believe people should run for office because they are the most qualified individual in their communities to truly and genuinely represent. So thank you for everything you said, because I think the Fair Elections Act will do exactly that. It will curtail, if not halt completely, the pay-to-play theory that we continuously see in government. It's unfortunate, but it is there. And we have had it in the city of Southgate. As many of you know, we've had issues with corruption. People say those who do the right thing don't win. You're looking at a winner. So thank you very much.
Thank you. One more question. I apologize to those standing behind this gentleman here. We just have time for one more question. Our city clerk here needs time to set up for the 10 o'clock council meeting. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul Ashford. I'm a local community college student at LACC, and I'm also a superintendent for a commercial construction company. I had a couple questions, but most pertinently, in regards to what Ron Kay said, why, as a council and as city leaders and as people running for government, why are these meetings, why are the people donating money, why are they not required full disclosure? All the people in this room, we are essentially paying your salaries, not directly, but the people of this government. Why is all of that information, every single thing that goes on behind the closed doors, why are we not allowed access to that? Why is that not written in a bullet-pointed description and a complete disclosure of every meeting that goes on in this building, in and around this city? The people who are running for offices, why is not every company, how much and when it was donated, in a bullet point, disclosed for all of the voters to see, for everyone involved?
Yes, thank you very much. Leanne, it'd be appropriate, Ron did bring up on a number of occasions the immediate disclosure of contributions. What are the rules and regulations on that right now?
Well, much of it is established under state law, and the local jurisdictions follow that in terms of the time frames. So it may be something that we need to take up with Sacramento. I think the technology is there. Again, it's a question of resources and will.
Well, just to correct Leanne, the city of Los Angeles can always make the laws tougher than the
and
state
we
law.
have. Thank you, Bob. We have, in fact, in some regards. But
so you can don't pass the buck there. Let the city council. Let the city council. But the laws are, in terms of the disclosure of contributions and expenditures, are pretty good.
Ethics.lacity.org.
They're not every day, but they are pretty good. It's the question that Ron is going even beyond that. He's talking about meetings. He's talking about calendars, and that's a whole different situation.
Okay, so it's not the actual contribution was his question, but we do have a rule that within a certain time, for example, I've been told if I get a check, I have to report it within a certain, or I have to give it to my treasurer. There's some rules that...
Yeah, there are some rules that require you to, get a check in if it's not considered received by a certain date, and there are a number of rules that establish time frames. The 24-hour time frame is not something currently in play.
It's not
and
currently in play.
I think the technology is there. It's quarterly during an election year in the city and 6 months in a non-election
6 months it'll be disclosed, and that is on our website, the City of LA website, if anybody wants to see the contributions.
But this is my point about it being a passive thing. Much more is disclosed on the website than I'm sure everybody in this room, including me, is aware of. And it's a question of going and finding. And then there's the question of motivation. Do voters really want to know all of that? They want to know some of it. But somebody has to be an intermediary to say this is where you should look and this is why you should look there.
Ron Kay does that somewhat right now. Well, let me just say thank you very much to our panel. I really, really appreciate you taking your time. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, Jose.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. I think our public thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you to the audience who's here and to our friends who are watching on Channel 35. I think this is the type of discourse that creates good public policy when we're able to, all of us, no matter what side of the fence we're on, we get to sit down and communicate and talk. And so this is, I think we're going to take this. We're going to see how we can continue to improve the system we have. And again, thank you very much. And I see probably other forums coming in the future on this topic and others, because I think it's a good way to inform our public on some timely issues. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
any topic. Then we go into our regular agenda, which varies from month to month, and the public can comment on specific agenda items after they're presented, as well as at the end of the meeting, we have another open mic session where they can comment on anything that they want to. And the commissioners listen quite well to these things, and we found out a lot of things that needed correction, and it's led to agenda items on our agenda to investigate, to call people in to explain how a system is working and whether it's working well enough. It's a very important part of what our process. It's how we get feedback from the community, and the community can bring problems to us.
And again, our meetings, we certainly encourage. We have a large enough conference room, so we certainly can have more participation, and we do encourage that, and we do provide, upon request, materials in Braille and large print. We have a captionist, so we provide real-time captioning. We'll provide a sign language interpreter as well. So we try to make the commission meetings as accessible as possible. I want to thank our guests, Sam Overton, the chairperson, and Luis Herrera, member, City Commission on Disability, for being with us on Disability Forum. Again, if you would like information about the Department on Disability, you may reach us by phone at 213-485-6334 voice or 213-485-6655 TTY, or via email at www.lacity.org/DOD. Also, if you have a question or comment about Disability Forum, please email me directly at mitch.pomerantz, Pomerantz, @lacity.org. This has been Disability Forum with your host, Mitch Pomerantz. Until next time, thanks for watching and take care.
Check this out, I'm at the light, right? Dude was trying to fill me out, so I blew right past him. Yeah, I won. But I wasn't the real winner, because he's alive. I'm dead.
What about my family? I wasn't even part of your street race. Now I'm dead.
And don't even think, man, that'll never happen to me, dog, because that's what I thought. And now, I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye.
Listen, life is important. Drive responsibly. Learn more at watchtheroad.org.
Good morning. Emergency Preparedness Patrol. Is your family prepared for disaster? Mom! Emergencies can strike at any time. That's why it's important to have a family emergency plan in case you're separated during a disaster. Have an emergency supply kit ready with non-perishable food items such as dry goods, canned goods, and water. Don't forget extra medication for elderly family members. And extra pet food, too. Include a first aid kit, a battery-operated radio, extra batteries, and, of course, a waterproof flashlight. And to reduce the risk of serious injury, fasten all freestanding items securely, including water heaters. This family gets a passing grade for being prepared. Emergency preparedness. It's an LA thing.
is CityView Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
is excused and Mr. Kazan is excused. excused today. Ms. Perry is excused to arrive late. Correct, she's sick today. So please, again, Councilman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City Council special meeting for March 4th, 2010. We're here in the John Farrell Council Chambers, room 340 of City Hall. Our normal meetings are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m. For our budget deliberations. We have been meeting on Mondays and Thursdays as well. And I want to thank those council members that are here on time. We do now have a quorum. So, Madam Clerk, if you please call the roll.
We're 10. We got 10.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Weezer, Koretz, Krikoyan, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay, first order of business, please. If we can run through the agenda.
The first item on the agenda is an item for which public hearing has been held. There are 2 reports on the file, Budget and Finance and EE, and there's an ordinance, and I believe 12 council members will be present today. Do you wish to hold that on the desk?
Let's see if they are. We have a council member out sick and a couple coming, but let's hold that on the desk in the meantime, see if we can get a 12-member quorum. Next items, please.
Next items are items for which public hearings have not been held, items 2 through 8, and 10 votes are required for consideration on those, and there are cards on 2, 4, and 8 is what I have so far.
Okay. We'll call those special for cards. We'll open and close the public hearings on the other ones. I'd like to call 7 special and 8 together, if we can. I'll call those special. Other specials, colleagues? Why don't we call 3 special as 3 and 4? Actually, make it all of them except, I know 2 is already called special for card, but I'll just call all those special 3 through 8. And with that, colleagues, today is the day that we have a lot of motions that have been put forward by each of you, and communications from our CLA and our CAO on revenue ideas, and trying to peg some more concrete numbers to the revenue-generating ideas that can help us strengthen our reserve fund, balance next year's budget, and continue to provide services for the people of Los Angeles. My recommendation would be that we take up first item 7, which was just to frame today. I can quickly go over what the other items are that are before us. A number of members have spoken, I think everybody, about debt collection. And I'd like to take that up first with the CAO and the Office of Finance in a couple minutes to look at regarding the City Administrative Officer with the assistance of other city departments to report to the City Council with a summary report on what sort of debt we may be able to more aggressively get to help us through the budget shortfalls that we have. Later, when we have 12 members, we'll take up item number 1, which is our transfer from the Department of Water and Power, the public dividend that essentially helps, since it is a publicly owned water and power company, helps preserve the services that we depend on in the city of Los Angeles. Then number 3, which is Ms. Hahn's motion on a contract layoff list. will come up at 12:15, thereabout, to see if there are items that can be immediately terminated of any contracts, and those funds be made available to contract in those items. And then also, following that, we'll deal with the 10% contract reduction or more, the idea of reducing our contract costs in order to save monies as well. The last two that we have are items 6 then and 5. 6 would be the CAO reporting on temporary revenue advancement solutions that can be immediately implemented for this year's budget shortfall. And number 5 is the unclaimed monies, I think 272,000 roughly from the Los Angeles Police Department's unclaimed monies funds, to put that into the budget as well. So if that seems like a decent timeline, maybe we could start, I guess item 7 we have basically dealt with. Is there any, if we could ask the CAO and CLA to come forward, if they are close by. And as soon as we have them, we will begin to hear kind of in general some of the revenue ideas that were put before us, and then we'll move to item 8, which is for the CAO and Office of Finance to report. Why don't we take up item 8 first, and we'll go to the cards on that one. Mr. Sachs, if you'd like to come forward on item number 8.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I kind of can carry them together, 7 and 8. I believe the prior fiscal year, there was a budget deficit. And I believe also the year prior to that, there was a budget deficit. So this revenue that you're looking to collect, when there was a 2-year-old deficit, were any of these ideas bannered about then? When there was a revenue deficit from last year, were any of these ideas for revenue collection talked about by the City Council then? And now you're back with another deficit, and now you're going to dig your heels in and collect this overdue revenue. Must be a change in the City Council. No. 15 members, 13 the same council member. So what ideas, again, are you preparing to toss around in this game of who's on first that will get the public's confidence? 2 years in a row, this is actually 3 years in a row, the city has faced debt. 3 years in a row, the city has faced outstanding revenue owed to it. You haven't done anything the other 2 years. Now you're going to dig your heels in because now you're serious. And we should have confidence in you because of your past history. Now wait, that doesn't make sense. Because if your past history gave us any confidence, then this outstanding debt would have shrunk because of those previous revenue shortfalls. But instead, it increased. So, I'm looking forward to listening to this outstanding commentary and this oratory from the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Flagg.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Garcetti. Honorable council members, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk with you. Maybe one day we'll get a microphone that extends for us tall people. I'd like to talk to you about a number of things, but first I'd like to remind you the credit reports, the credit agencies who have come out and downgraded the city of Los Angeles in the past few weeks, they didn't do it because of business as usual. They didn't do it because we have one-time inflows. They didn't do it because the mayor is suggesting layoffs. They did it because the mayor has not suggested a business plan. We don't have a business plan. CAO's 3-year plan dilly-dallies about it, tap dances around a business plan, but really does not address it. The mayor and council have got to roll up their sleeves and really get into the great details of what's necessary. I know that this body is working on doing that. I have great faith in you. I look forward to great things coming about. One of those items is we need to look at the contracts. $2 billion out of the $7 billion budget for contracts. You can't tell me there's not a lot of fluff there at least a few $100 million of fluff. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, in the bureaus of engineering and sanitation, we do have some fluff there. We have some very important contracts, but we have a lot of fluff that the city staff could be doing. The same general funded people who are backfilling vacant positions, funded positions in these bureaus, could be doing that work today. So we have a choice. We can do 10% layoffs, which doesn't help us deliver services. We can do contracting out, which helps us even less in balancing the budget, or we can contract in to the very people who know how to do the work, have advanced degrees in doing the work, and are doing the work right now, successfully, in as much as this body is allowing them to do so. This body needs to direct very strongly the departments in this manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we'll return to item 7. Mr. Sachs, if you'd like to come forward on item 7. Okay. I'd then like to ask the CLA to come forward on item number 7 and give us a report. Colleagues, we had the matrix, and there's been an updated options for revenue generation from the CLA. I'd turn your attention to that item that each of us have, and thank you, Mr. Miller.
Good morning. This is similar to the chart you've seen previously, although much shorter. What I tried to focus on here are issues of immediate concern that could generate money this year or for which their instructions have already been given. We've also, as requested by Mr. Parks, included an update of some of the revenue measures from last year. Again, there are really only a handful of issues, 3 of which relate to the fire department. The EMS voluntary fee, you did instruct us at the last revenue day to proceed to look at that. And that is going to actually be impacted by the ambulance billings as well. The fire department is working on seeing whether we are at full cost recovery for ambulance billings and also the treatment note transport fee. So they may want to address where they are on the timing on that. We're still awaiting the information on how much room we have on the ambulance billings and what a treatment note transport fee might look like. You should be aware that the City of Tracy recently enacted a treatment note transport fee and has come under significant criticism, so we are looking at that. It is our understanding that largely these would be paid for by insurance companies for medical treatment. There are, of course, exemptions for people with certain income qualifications. Excuse me. We've also then, item C is the documentary transfer tax for transfers, legal entities. We're suggesting that the council proceed to authorize the county to collect that documentary transfer tax. Revenues are not expected to be huge, but up to $13 million a year, probably less than that in most years. It's going to be a very volatile tax like the rest of the documentary transfer tax, but we believe that that's one that you can proceed on. Item D is burglar alarm fees. I know that LAPD is on its way over. They're looking at raising those fees. I think the question before you today is whether we can get an ordinance through to generate some money this year, and PD can address that. Finally, as part of Mr. Smith's working group on public safety, there are a variety of issues that fire department is looking at to recover additional costs and fees. We do not have numbers for that, but we've included that because that's one thing that we're going to be tracking closely. The last issue, or the last items relate to prior instructions on revenues. Most have been completed. The one outstanding issue is posting no parking signs on streets that are not posted now, that are not swept weekly. As you recall, you talked about that some time ago. There is a report that's pending in Public Works Committee dealing with that. So sanitation may want to address the status of that posting. It's not simply a revenue measure, it's also an action to make sure that those streets are swept. But currently, those streets are swept not on a weekly basis, but they are swept. But they have to go around cars that are parked. So this would, in essence, require no parking on those days. Excuse me. In summary, that's what's before you. Here to answer any questions, and you may want the fire department to come up and address where they are, not only on these issues, but as you recall, there were 2 ordinances, I believe they're brush clearance fees, that are still outstanding that are programmed for this year.
Okay, Mr. Parks?
Thank you, Mr. President. Jerry, could you tell us on item C on your chart whether all the legal issues have been resolved on the issue of transfer, documentary transfer tax?
I know those issues are still being looked at. The city is one of 5 cities within the county that has a DTC, and all the other 4 have authorized the collection of that tax, and the county is willing to proceed. They simply need the city's, in essence, they need the city to allow them to proceed to collect that tax on transfers of property.
Now, the issue is that, so with that being reviewed, is it in the hands of the county council, or is it something that the city can continue to do to press the matter, or just what's the status in that regard?
The county county council has looked at it, the Board of Supervisors has authorized them to collect it, the other 4 cities have authorized them to collect it. So this is a tax that the county would collect and then remit to the city.
Okay, so do they have any timeline with the process they're working on? Because I understand they've been working on it now for the last several years.
They have. They're prepared to begin immediately.
To deal with it immediately, do we then have a thought of how much revenue that would produce annually as far as the city share?
Going over the past several years, the highest number, it looks like, was about $13.7 million from these transactions. The average is probably somewhere, $4 to $6 million on average.
Okay. And would we be able to go retroactively, or does it start at the time they initiated?
At this point, the intent is just to begin collecting the tax. I don't know that any retroactivity has been looked at yet.
Okay. The other issue I'd like to just mention, and although it's not necessarily a direct revenue source, but we've been working for about 5 years on this whole sidewalk issue, in which it's pretty clear that the city is in a business that's deemed not a core responsibility, and certainly by state law and even some of our ordinances say that the responsibility is really the property owner. And if the records that we have from the city's street services, they say that they've spent between 2001 fiscal year to 08-09 over $95 million on repairing sidewalks, about 550 miles. And during that period, sidewalks have deteriorated more than what we've completed or fixed. And it would appear if we can get that item out of Public Works, we can get out of a business that we're doing poorly. We can use that money, that even though it's a small amount this year, the money that we've been scheduling for sidewalks can go to something else. And I think in the motion that you prepared for us 5 years ago was that we also talked about how it might end up being a business issue for small businesses to get into repairing the sidewalks and creating small businesses in the community, to where they then have to buy the business license, pay taxes, and also hire employees. And so it's something that appears that if we, and then also we have the litigation cost. At least a couple of $1 million a year we're paying out for people tripping and falling on sidewalks that the property owner does not believe it's their responsibility, and rarely, if ever, are they sued in the lawsuits. Is primarily a city issue. So if we could look at that, and I'll hand you this report, see if we can capture that out of Public Works and move it, it would take us out of the business. We get the city attorney's already prepared the ordinance to move the responsibility to back to the property owner. It appears from the history that we took on that responsibility a couple of decades ago because there were federal funds available to do that. Right. Those federal funds have dried up, and we're still in the business. And so we need to correct that, get out of the business, and move the responsibility where it should be. And it's a major issue in which the city would no longer be responsible or spending money. So if we could ask, although it's not a direct revenue issue, it will certainly save us money as it relates to getting back into core responsibilities and also out of the litigation area.
Sure, we'll get you the status on that and we'll report back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the city attorney has a comment on the documentary transfer tax.
Yes, I just want to add that there are some concerns that we've identified in our legal analysis of the documentary tax proposal. I've not had the opportunity to communicate them to the CLA, and I will do that. You should be aware that those still need to be resolved before that goes anywhere. And I'll meet with the CLA this week, if he's available.
Moving for such a long time, if we can accelerate that process of those legal issues, because my recent conversation with the tax assessor in the county, they believe it's resolved. But the issue is the conflict is that there's some interpretation by the city legal team that they don't necessarily agree with. So that's the bind that we need to get resolved so that we can move forward, because it's several $1 million a year that is in play if we resolve those legal interpretations of the law. And so Ms. Whitehurst at the county is more than willing to sit down and see how we can do that quickly, because it's funds that are available to the city.
Right. We're prepared to meet with the CLA this week or early next week at his convenience. I, unfortunately, did not loop back in time for this presentation. The two issues involve both state statute and Proposition 218. Those have not been addressed as far as we know by County Council. We'd be happy to look at that and discuss further.
And then the other one, because you're sitting there, the two issues that Jerry brought up earlier, those two ordinances that are that we really need on the brush clearance, and what was the other one, Jerry?
Those two ordinances.
The two for brush clearance. If we can get those facilitated, that's a revenue source that also will increase the current dollars that we're bringing into the city.
Absolutely, and we're working with the fire department to get those done as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Actually, a point of clarification, the revenues from those ordinances are already plugged into the budget. If we do not get them in place quickly, then we will have a hole in the budget.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miller, when you spoke in street services and street clearing, I know I wanted to go to sanitation, but on our issue of street cleaning, 86% of all debris is located within a foot of the gutter. And it is for the health reasons, as you mentioned in the close of your presentation. To look at that as far as expanding that is really key as a sense of service, which is so important. My belief is it should be in sanitation so the trash could follow all the way, hopefully out of the drains and not go into the drains, not of the streets, into recycling and other materials. In follow-up to Mr. Park's statements, the 1911 Act for assessments calls for those street improvements that are necessary. And it was Mr. Parks during then-President Nixon's time who was, if you want to say something extremely forthright about then-President Nixon, he was good for cities. He provided money for cities, and Los Angeles then determined that they should, instead of citing our owners of property, we should provide the money for the sidewalk repair. That being said, it is an overwhelming task. Our question would be, do we want to turn back to cite the people for them to fix? That's our question, council members, to cite the property owners, to have them fix it, and also provide for a variety of public works entrepreneurs, if you could call it, like a list that may be at the public works counter. There would be a no-fee permit so you could fix your own sidewalk. The question I wanted to ask, if you look, when Mr. Fujioka was here, when we discussed this, I thought it would be important that we create, as we have an asphalt plant, a cement plant. And that never went anywhere. Could you just make note of that? Because that's, if there's anything shared, Bernard, that we should do, since everybody walks in the public property, if I cited you as a public works inspector and you would have to fix it, possibly somehow work into the arrangement of the cost of the cement. That's a heavy cost. I know it is, but it's something that should be looked at. And also, as we go forward, Mr. Miller, in these discussions, public works is extremely important, because that would be a great transformation. I'm ready right now to vote that those who own commercial property should receive a notice from the city to make immediate improvements to their sidewalks for the safety, health, and welfare of those who transverse them. I'm not so sure that I want to go after property owners in residential or multiple units at this time. but I think we could separate that to look at it two ways, both the commercial property, or what is C or M zoned, or industrial zoned, and then what is residential zoned, and make sure that the city attorney can apply some legality to that as well. But I think we've got to look at Public Works, and also, too, in this critical time, if it's stuck in committee at some point, we should bring it out, because those are issues that are very critical as we try to continue to provide services for Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cardenas.
Question of CLA. Jerry, and if CAO can come up, whoever's here from the CAO's office, if you can be present at the table. Jerry, these proposals talk about the potential for increasing revenues from various sources and various ideas. However, none of these proposals talk about raising taxes. What is the procedure that we're confined to or required to go through in the city of Los Angeles to raise taxes? Can you give me some of the main examples of how taxes are raised locally that could actually go to the general fund of the city of Los Angeles or any controlled account by the city?
Certainly. Well, under Prop 218, for a tax, the only way that the council can raise a tax is to go to the voters.
To create a tax or raise the amount of the tax?
To create a tax or raise an existing tax. In this coming November...
hold on a second. Slow down.
Sure.
Proposition 218, what do you mean by Prop 218? What is it?
Prop 218 was an initiative that, again, signatures were gathered and was put on the state ballot to amend the state constitution, which, as I indicated, requires a vote to raise virtually any, to increase or establish any new tax. There are only a couple of exceptions, and they have to do with trash collection and with water, and then we're limited to cost recovery.
Okay. Now, is there anything that the council can do to raise taxes without having to go through the Proposition 218 requirements?
There is not.
So these examples that you gave us today are real tangible opportunities to raise revenues for the city. These are the kind that can actually be taken action by the city council, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you talk about Proposition 218, if taxes are raised, that means that how many voters would have to vote in favor of raising taxes in order for that proposal to pass when the voters get a chance to decide if they want to raise taxes?
Okay, for a special tax, for example, if you wanted to levy a parcel tax for fire and EMT services, that would require a two-thirds vote of the electorate. If you wanted to raise a general tax, which could be used for any general fund purposes,
which would likely go into the general fund of the city of Los Angeles, should that pass?
Yes, and that would not be restricted for a particular use. It could be used for any general fund purpose. That requires a majority vote. However, you can only put those on a ballot on which the legislative body is running. So the only time in which the city council could do a general tax would be in the spring on the odd number years. Your next opportunity would be spring of 2011.
So in other words, only when people who are running for office for the city of Los Angeles, only when it's a regular cycle of those elections, only in those cycles can a 50% tax requirement vote take place before the voters.
Yes, and however, I apologize, but there is one exception to that. And that is that if the legislative body unanimously and the mayor find that there's a fiscal emergency, then you can put a general tax on a special election ballot. But you would have to have the findings and basis for that emergency. We did that on our telephone users. We did that on our telephone users tax. The rationale behind that is that it was being challenged in the court, and if we had lost that tax, it would have been $250 million. So the emergency was the uncertainty on the legal challenges.
Thank you for remembering that last part. Thank you.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I know we're still in the process of formulating the policy because of the need to define the fee, but if we had the assumption that the marijuana dispensaries and/or the tags per plant for cultivation, is there a ballpark figure there? Do we pretend it's not there, or do we wait for it to happen, or is it too early to try to establish guesstimates?
It is too early. Now, there are two elements to this. You have instructed Building and Safety to come back with a fee ordinance for enforcement. That you can do to recover your costs for enforcing the ordinance. But in terms of a tax on marijuana dispensaries, that would require a 218 vote. Now, the amount of money that could be collected through that would obviously depend on how that tax is structured. Long Beach, I believe, has a tax, and it only collects about $350,000 a year. So, again, depending upon how this tax is structured, it's really far too early to determine how much we might collect on that.
So would we have to then start the steps for going down the 218 process? When do we start doing that?
Well, in order to place an item on the November ballot, the council would have to instruct by June 30th the city attorney to draft the ballot title and resolution and ordinance. So between now and June 30th, we would have to determine what the basis of a marijuana dispensary tax would be.
So if I were to do a verbal motion now to trigger that action, will that give us the momentum we need for the June deadline?
Well, you've already instructed us to look at that. In terms of the November ballot, one of the unfortunate elements of Prop 218 is you can't avoid ballot strategy. Now, there are a half dozen or more proposals to raise revenue: a library assessment, a fire assessment, the gang tax, the medical marijuana assessment, the raise and documentary transfer tax, a proposal in TOT. The council, between now and June 30th, is going to have to determine which, if any of those, it wants to put on, and the advisability of putting them all on.
What's the window that triggers our deadline for making that decision? How far in advance from June do we have to actually make that commitment? Do you know?
Well, again, we have instructions to work on all of these, and we are continuing to work on all of those. I didn't present them today because the focus today is on immediate issues.
Right.
We continue to work on it. But between now and June 30th, the council is going to have to determine which of those revenue measures it wants to put on the November ballot. But you will have between now and June 30th your options on how those various items would be based.
In closing, could we get just a report back in terms of a timeline in which we have to act? Is that...
Well, certainly.
Okay.
We can put it in writing. It's June 30th to make the initial instruction, and it is July 17th, I believe, to actually approve the ballot title and the resolution. Those are your two operative dates.
Then that's self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Good morning.
There's a lot of different thoughts you have on here. Some of them are exciting and some of them are problematic. Let me just first talk about sidewalks. It's a big problem. We've got rid of the 50-50 program. Why did we get rid of the 50-50 program, which was where the citizen put up 50 cents, we put up 50 cents for each street, each sidewalk that was repaired?
In essence, because we couldn't afford our 50%.
And since we couldn't do that, where have we gone on point of sale, which is when you sell your property, your house, that a certain amount as authorized for that sidewalk is put aside in the escrow process so that that could be done. That was something when I was Chair of Public Works we talked about. What about that concept for sidewalks?
That's the ordinance that Mr. Parks was referring to, and we're going to have to check on the status on that ordinance and get it to you soon, quickly.
Okay, so the bottom line is anybody who has a problem with their sidewalk, it's going to be their responsibility at the moment to fix it.
Correct. If the council proceeds to adopt the ordinance, certainly at least at the point of sale, the proposal would be that the sidewalks would have to be fixed.
And then would there be clarity given to the resident of what number to call to have somebody come out, talk about how much it will cost, bless the strategy, and then give them a list of contractors they could work with?
Absolutely. Some of those provisions should certainly be included in the ordinance in terms of the process for getting those repairs done.
Okay, and then what I'm going to be very concerned about is homeowner groups and neighborhood councils in my district understanding this policy. It's a big issue in my district to get the sidewalks fixed. Will we have a public relations campaign to get that information out?
We certainly can. Obviously, I would assume the council would direct that happens when it gets implemented.
All right, that's story one. Second thing I want to talk about is code enforcement issues. There's a lot of code enforcing that doesn't happen, be it zoning code enforcement, or be it development code enforcement, or being it existing codes that exist in building and safety. Has anybody thought about revenue streams based on violation of the laws now that are not enforced?
Well, I think for the most part you're going to need building and safety, I think, and fire department to address that. That certainly is an issue. In terms of code enforcement, again, we can recover our costs for the code enforcement. We cannot make a quote-unquote profit unless it's a task that's approved by the voters.
I have a constituent, I'll just say his first name, Ronnie, who has been very strong about code enforcement and very strong about building and safety following through, and that there is revenue out there that we could get if people just lived within the law. First they're told about it, and then they don't do it, they get fined for it, and then they get shaped up. I mean, we have those laws on the books, we just don't enforce them. Another is meters. I've been saying this since the beginning. Right now, 17 to 19% of our meters out there are broken. There's no revenue stream coming in from existing meters. They got the little hat on that says broken meters all over the place. Have we talked to DOT of what strategy we can employ now to fix those broken meters?
Yes. I believe that it was last week they made a presentation. The council authorized proceeding with a parking meter study. In parallel, DOT was instructed to proceed with an RFQ to identify the proper technologies and to target areas where they need to make sure that meters are maintained in good working order to maximize revenue, et cetera. So that is an ongoing process that we're in regular conversation with DOT on.
Okay, and I look for a report back on that in the context of timetable of repairing those 17 to 19% so that we can be clear there's gold in the gutter that right now should be picked up from the meters. Also, there are districts where there are no meters at all. And one council member has said, I've been asking for meters in my district for years. Can we look at the overall map of the city in the context of where new meters could conceivably go in if it makes sense to do it?
Certainly.
Could we instruct that again to DOT to come back on that? And the last thing I want to do real quickly is naming rights. I don't want to sell off the city, but on the other hand, can naming rights be a partnership? For instance, we just opened up the Venice Skateboard Park. It's the hottest skateboard park in the world. We have more people going there than anything else at Venice Beach. And it makes that whole area there where there's skateboarding, there's bicycling, there's music, dancing, a whole new piece of land has become a terrific community asset. But wouldn't it be great if we could figure a relationship where somebody could get some naming rights and we could get a lot of money? Can we look into the naming rights concept and actually bring back proposals for various parts of our city where maybe that would be tasteful? I don't want to do something that's not tasteful. But on the other hand, as long as we don't give up our rights, and maybe you review the naming rights over a period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl, and I can ask you to press your button again.
A lot of fun. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weezer. Mr. Weezer.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly mention that as the new chair of Public Works Committee, I know it's been mentioned, the sidewalk issue has been mentioned. That's been in that committee for some time. I work with the CLA to have a way to bring it to full council for discussion through these budget proceedings. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Labange. Mr. Labange passes. All right, I think the actions on these folks on item number 7 had moved along, have been taken. I think the most important one is the clarification from the City Attorney's Office with the CLA. If we could arrange for that to happen today for the City Attorney's Office, we'd be most appreciative. If it's not already happening right now, but at least if that meeting could happen today, that would be great. On the document transfer tax. Thank you. Thank you. Other than that, let's go ahead now We have item number 8, debt collection. Then I can ask the CAO and Office of Finance to come forward, please. Sure, I'm sorry, as they're coming up, but let's stay on 7, just take that vote on those motions. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. Number 8. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Mr. Parks, did you want to frame debt collection at all, or do you want to? And I know this has been of concern to a number of us that have put in motions on this, but I'll defer to our Chair of Budget and Finance first.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, colleagues, on the issue of debt collection, I think there's probably no less than maybe a dozen motions addressing it all the way from a collection sheriff to looking at ways to where we can look at the 250 top debtors, also looking at issues to where we don't allow people to do business with the city if they owe us money. And I think the whole issue is what's important today, I think, is to get a framework of what is real money, because we know from the prior presentations of Department of Finance that when we look at the list of the debtors, it's an estimated value as opposed to real dollars, and they can explain why they have to do that to secure potential litigation down the road. And the variety of things that have come forward, many times we have had an inflated view of what real dollars are, and I think that's what the purpose of bringing them forth today, and we hope they have the city attorney, because they have a big portion of going to court, and then the legal issues of them bringing people to court. Most of that is confidential if it's a criminal case, so they can't lay out these cases in public, but we want to get really what real money is, what the likelihood of money that can be captured, so that we're not dealing with large, unreasonable numbers that are not collectible, or we're not continually passing on or expanding the rumors about all of this debt that's collectible and no one's getting their arms around it. And that goes from the ambulance fees to traffic citations to all of the things that come into the city's coffers. So the whole issue is to try to give us as up-to-date understanding of what's out there, what's real, what's available to be captured within the city system. Where are we with the issue of the vendors that we have out collecting money on our behalf? Where we are also on the status of putting all collections under the Department of Finance. All those things we need to just kind of walk through to give the council a better understanding of what our current situation is. So let's start off with Ms. Cristobal.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm a little late, so I hope I understand everything that you are asking my office to speak on. But the Office of Finance has been working very closely with the City Attorney's Office, particularly as it relates to the top debtors as well as the other uncollected debt. We have set up a proposed plan to address these debtors utilizing a strike team that would include representatives from the Office of Finance as well as the City Attorney's Office and any other department that might have an outstanding debt that we need to go after. We will be moving forward with this plan sometime next week. We do have a meeting tomorrow that we're going to vet it a little further. But relative to the overall debt, the accounts receivable portion, we have been working closely with various departments. Of course, we still have the two large debtors, which are the parking citations and the ambulance billings. And those two departments, I think they can come forward. I believe they're represented here and speak about that. But relative to the parking citation piece, there is a contract that is currently in place with the Department of Transportation, which minimizes our ability to be able to amend that particular contract, which I believe expires March of 2011. And so the plan is that the Office of Finance will work with the Department of Transportation to draft an RFP that would allow for referral of delinquent parking citations to the city contracted collection agencies, because presently that is not happening, and we believe it's important to have that tool in place in addition to the collection efforts of the primary contractor. On the ambulance billing side, we are still waiting on the fire department and the city attorney's office to address the business associate agreement, which allows for the delinquent ambulance billings to be referred to the citywide collection agencies. The ordinance is in place that allows for that to happen. It's just a matter of getting that worked through so that the ambulance billing delinquent accounts could be referred. If you take parking citations and ambulance billings, that represents about almost 90% of the delinquent accounts receivable. So I think it's very important that we do that. And of course, we're going to be reporting quarterly to the City Council, Budget and Finance Committee, relative to the delinquent accounts receivable, as well as submitting an annual report with recommendations to the Mayor and Council as to things that can be done to, improve upon the collection of delinquent accounts. The City Attorney's Office could probably address the lien authority. We are still waiting on that, and we think that that's going to help us substantially in terms of, we're hoping that we will be able to place liens not only on personal property, but also on real property. And so we're hoping that that will be coming forward fairly soon. The secondary collection agencies, which was something that Councilwoman Hahn had recommended, we have a committee in place that will be reviewing the 12 proposals that were submitted, with the expectation that those proposals will be reviewed, and a number of secondary collection agencies will be placed on contract in the coming weeks.
Okay. Let me just take a break on that and ask Georgia, and she's done this recently, but in the context of what we're dealing with today, could you go over the fire, the issue dealing with the collections?
Good morning, council members. I'm Georgia Matera, the fire administrator for the department. Actually, in addressing the issue of referring the uncollectibles, as you remember, that ordinance was amended recently to allow us to refer all uncollectible ambulance accounts to collections, and that has been completed. Our business associate agreement has been completed, and as of March 1st, the fire department has referred approximately $90 million in uncollectible accounts for a total of 44,000 accounts. We have $16 million remaining, and once that gets sent on April 1st, we will have referred $105 million to collections. And the amount outstanding would be $49 million to go to collections, and those accounts are still being currently processed.
And also, could you give us a thumbnail on the process of the technology and that part? Again, you've done it recently, but again, in this context.
Okay. As you know, there's a ambulance billing project that we talk about, and that project is actually will be coming before the council within the next month. It has two components. It has a field data capture piece, which allows our paramedics out in the field to collect patient information and electronically transmit it to our vendor. Our vendor piece will be the people who will collect the ambulance bills, and they will work with our collections agency, the Office of Finance agency, to allow us to refer those accounts that are uncollectible. We feel that once this is in place, we will generate approximately about $10.8 million within a 6-year period, and we are on our way to council within, as I said, within a month.
Thank you very much, and we're going to ask LADOT in a minute to come up, and also the city attorney.
All right, Mr. Parks, are you completing your questioning?
I'll push my button again.
You push your button again, so we're going to hold off on LAPD right now?
No, we're going to get LADOT
DOT.
in a minute.
DOT right now, thank
City
you.
attorney.
City attorney.
He's done with his time right now, but...
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Garcetti, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this year, Antoinette, we budgeted $60 million into the budget on debt collection, 30 plus 30. Is that accurate?
That's 60 million within the Office of Finance.
Right, for the Office of Finance
yes,
portion.
uh-huh.
Okay. And I have heard that the working group has a meeting, I guess, later today or tomorrow, that we're estimating we might be able to put somewhere around 20 million more in?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware?
Yeah.
Is there any idea of what you think we can get? And let me incentivize it more. We like to use private sector types of incentives, which is, I think that, and this applies to fire department, and this applies to DOT, but what we do above and beyond what we've done, I think there should be a reward for. So where you're able to get more in terms of your budgeting, I think that you should be able to reap a little bit of that to keep your people whole. I would also say the same thing, and have said the same thing with our city attorney, Carmen Trutanich, who is excited by the possibility. I don't know exactly what your commission rate would be, but with that in mind, I've heard floated that this year it might be a realistic number to hone in on about $20 million of debt that Office of Finance has. Is that way off? Is that, where would you begin to estimate that number? Because part of what we have to do is we have to plug that in ASAP.
Right. I would say relative to taxes receivables, we actually utilize outside collection agencies as well as the city attorney's office, the top debtor lists and parking revocation for parking taxes. Any additional amount over and above what we collect would have to come from what the city attorney's office thinks that they could collect through expanded efforts. And so we will work closely with the city attorney's office on addressing their portion relative to taxes. As far as the accounts receivable dealing with the departmental receipts that you spoke about, Georgia actually indicated that the ambulance billings will now be referred to the citywide collection agencies, and I think she's anticipating about over a 6-year period, so about $2.5 million additional per year. We certainly could work with the fire department to see if we can get a better estimate there. On the parking citation side, unfortunately, because of the contract constraints where we cannot amend it, they actually have the accounts, the parking citations for the full 5-year period. And after 5 years, they go out of statute. So we're a little constrained relative to on DOT side, but hopefully they can come forward and address it a little further. And of course, we're going to continue to work with the other departments that have smaller receivables to, to move them forward as well in terms of collections. But I think any additional amount relative to taxes, the city attorney's office would have to identify what they think, because they have a large percent of the accounts. The more difficult accounts that we have not been able to collect on, these are debtors that are not willing to pay up front.
Okay. So maybe we can have the city attorney report on that piece. What does the city attorney believe we can get right now based on these conversations in this coming in this year? And so, in other words, somebody has to start doing the thinking here. I mean, we can keep asking the questions over and over, but we're not doing it. I know there's a work group, but that time is ticking. I'm not asking for a precise thing. If you don't get there, we're going to hold you accountable. Obviously, anything new is new. But in balancing this year's budget, communicating what we believe our reserve fund will be, et cetera, what does the city attorney think we might be able to get? And maybe you can ask the CAO in the end to kind of, from what they've been hearing, start attaching a number to this year's budget.
Good morning, council members. My name is Noreen Vincent with the City Attorney's Office, and if I may sort of set the parameters in terms of how we can try and reach a number about what we collect, we currently have about 650 cases that were referred by the Office of Finance. Those are cases that we filed. They're open cases. The total value that we are seeking is $73 million. We have collected already $6 million, and that was on about 40 cases that we were able to either settle or litigate through judgment.
If I can pause you there, is that something the CAO then did not budget? If they said this, the $73 million that the city attorney's office went after, they got $6 million, is that something that was not in the budget? Above and beyond?
Actually, that is something that we're going to be verifying in the next couple of days. We actually have a meeting set up with the parties involved to actually hash through some of these issues, find out what's in the queue, what we look like as far as timetable, as far as what the collection and what we actually bring in with the revenue.
If it is $6 million, is that $6 million above and beyond what was budgeted this year?
May I just clarify that? That's,
Sure.
I'm sorry,
Sure, go ahead.
between 2008
yeah.
to the present. So it would actually cut across fiscal years. But
Right, but we've already finished 2008-9 and
Correct.
bounced that budget. We're in this year's budget.
Yes.
I'm just trying to do what do we have in the bank right now? We anticipated a certain amount. We budgeted about $60 million from Office of Finance, et cetera. Is this revenues above and beyond when you're looking at the counter of the work that we're doing here? Is that
And that's what we're looking at. There's roughly about $3 million in the budget now. If we do get the 6, then certainly that would be over and above.
So it would be 3 additional. So right now we're still waiting on at least $3 million that we previously budgeted that we have not yet received.
That is correct.
Okay. So by my addition, we're $3 million up. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I was just advised that actually from July 10th through the present, we've collected $2 million of that $6 million. I think one of the things that we're looking at, and the total dollar amount that we filed is up to $75 million. However, of those cases, a number of them are based on actual audits, and some are based on estimated assessments provided by the Office of Finance. I think it's easier for us to estimate on the audited cases about what we think we're going to recover, and our recovery rate has been running at about 60%, which is far better than most collection agencies.
So 60%, and how much then are those audited cases?
I believe that most of those are audited. The estimated assessments are a little bit different, and since we don't have an audit to work with, I think we're trying to collect what the estimated assessment shows, and sometimes we can come close to that and sometimes not. And so that's why I think there's some risk associated with taking the $73 million figure and using that as something that we can realistically collect.
Sure.
I do want to say that we're working very closely with the Office of Finance. We've been meeting, and the Office of Finance is going through its records to determine the percentage of cases that we have that are actual audited cases, and I think that information will be very helpful. As Antoinette has indicated, we're looking at convening a strike force. We are also looking at having cases referred to us. Those cases that are audited would be referred directly to our office as opposed to going to outside collection agencies where they get a percentage of the recovery. So those are some of the things that we're putting in place to try and facilitate the collection. Our attorneys have been very aggressive. We find that in this time where finances are tight, that the taxpayers are basically contesting the taxes much more than before, that they are actually, we're going through discovery, we're going through motions, we're having to actually litigate the cases, and we're doing that. We find also that there are a number of taxpayers that basically default. So we have a judgment entered against them. And what happens when they default, essentially, is we're left with a judgment. We need to find a way to satisfy it. That requires that we basically identify assets, look for assets, identify them, and then attach them. One of the things that I think we've talked about that would benefit us greatly is to have an investigator assigned so that they could actually track down the resources. I think that would help very much in collecting the outstanding debt that we have a judgment on. We're certainly supportive of the idea of incentivizing us. We have clearly collection firms which get a percentage of the recovery, and some years ago, before our office was staffed up a bit more, the council authorized us to use outside law firms to assist in collection, and we basically are not referring to those firms any longer. We are taking everything in-house. We're taking everything we possibly can in-house. But again, those firms were collecting between 33 and 40% of the recovery. They were contingent fee agreements. So the idea of incentivizing us and providing us with some additional funding would be a great idea, and money that we could put back into furthering and expanding our collection efforts. One thing I also would just like to add is that not only are we aggressively pursuing the matters that have been referred to us, but we are also defending the city. We have a number of situations in which taxpayers have filed claims for relief, and I can tell you not that long ago we had a claim for $10 million. which we were successful in having dismissed. So I think the other side of this is that we do a great deal of defense work as well, and litigation in some of the larger cases like the TUT case and the Ardon case, which continue.
I'm about 7 minutes over now, so I'll press my button again. No, and we appreciate that. I mean, I think that's important to communicate to folks. We like that, and I want to publicly thank all the work that's being done, Office of Finance, City Attorney's Office, et cetera. Still want CAO's help here in honing in on some of the numbers, so I'll press my button and go back in that line of questioning again.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Reyes, for as long as you need.
Yeah, we didn't set a precedent with 7 minutes, did we? And bear with me with this question, but I'm right now going through an experience where through Prop O we were able to acquire a parcel of land. It's an old dairy site. There's still tenants. They still want to pay their rent. And they've been paying their rent, and they have their checks, but the city's not collecting it. Now, our office has called the different offices to get those checks in. And they're substantial amounts. I believe some of those checks might have been able to hire a planner or folks that need the job. So my question to you really is, with the EREP and the shift in personnel, at the level of interaction where the rubber meets the road, are we in a place now where we're not able to complete those tasks because positions are being moved and there's empty seats and you got that cascading effect? Is that the reason why they can't pick up those checks or they can't get those funds into our accounts?
You know what these are? Is that housing?
It's a microcosm. It's one small example, but I'm hoping it's not a peek into a bigger problem.
I will have to get back to you on that because I'm not aware of that particular situation. I know that departments refer delinquent accounts, and if this would be a rental type arrangement, it would probably be housing. And if they're not collecting on that, and it's under $5,000, it's being referred to the collection agency.
No, actually, they want to pay us. We are now the landowners through Prop O, and so they are our tenants technically, and they want to pay us their rent. And their checks are sitting on their desk because they've been trying to get the city to collect it, but the city's not responding.
Okay, I'm not aware of that, but I will definitely have a sidebar with you and get more information because we definitely need to pursue that. It's probably within the department that is handling that, which isn't in Office of Finance, but I will definitely check into that and get back to you. But relative to EREP, it is an impact within the Office of Finance Citywide Collections Unit and our Citywide Billing Collections Program. A number of our key staff are retiring through EREP, and so we're hoping that we will be able to backfill a number of those positions, and also we will be coming forward with additional resources to have a strike team in place that the City Attorney's Office talked about so that we could aggressively go after delinquent debtors. And I would suspect that for departments that have their own billing and collection functions, that they are being impacted by EREP as well because of the accounting series, which has seen a lot of those positions.
But you said something that was very important, and the mechanics of collecting what's owed to the city. Different departments have their own collection entities, like general services?
Yes, actually, and that's one of the things that, there's been a lot of discussion about centralization of billing and collection functions, and one of the things that we have included in our budget is a recommendation to centralize the billing and collection functions within the Office of Finance. Of course, it's subject to the stakeholders agreeing to that and the mayor and council, because that is our core responsibility, unlike other city departments like animal services would be, the safety of animals. Fire and police would be public safety, their core mission.
I understand.
So we do have a proposal for the council to vet that. But right now, departments do bill and collect their own for fees and services. Anything under $5,000 that isn't collected within 45 days of delinquency, the departments are supposed to refer those accounts to the citywide collection agencies within the Office of Finance.
So there could be a gap there. We don't know how they're performing until it gets to that level of concern.
The quarterly accounts receivable that I spoke to earlier has information that departments have provided us, which identifies the aging of that particular bill in terms of how old it is, in terms of is it 45 days delinquent or 90 days delinquent? So that information we are getting quarterly, and that is information that we will be sharing with the council, as we do with the mayor's office, with recommendations of what we think departments need to do to improve upon collecting the delinquent debt, in addition to ensuring that those accounts are referred to the city collection agencies based on the admin code timely.
Well, it is kind of embarrassing when the previous owner calls my office and says, "Councilman, we want to pay the city, but no one wants to pick up the checks," or "We've been trying to get it to you, but I'm getting the runaround because it looks like no one is coming in to actually pick it up and process the paperwork."
And as I
it's kind
said,
of embarrassing.
And I will definitely have a sidebar with you. I'm not aware of that. It's probably within a certain department that's handling that. So
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Parks.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Antoinette, could you walk us through, you in the beginning of the major business tax season, could you walk us through what that entails, the amount of money and collection, and then also part of your operation that I don't think people have a clear understanding. There's a certain amount of your money that comes because people voluntarily comply, but there's a good portion of your money that you actually have to go beat the bushes and find people who are either delinquent or are not registered. And so if you can give some context to both of those, and then also throw in AB 63 as to also how that helps you collect funds.
Okay, well, we're right. The citywide, the business tax season actually is still in process right now, although the business taxes are due by February 28th of each tax year. In this particular case, because February 28th was on a Sunday, the business tax was due March 1st. So we are now compilating the collections, and we'll have a report back on that. But not every business renews their license and pays their taxes by the February 28th date. What we find is there's about a 30 to 40% delinquency rate there. So we will collect about, say, 200 or 300 million, and then there's another 130 million, give or take, that we have to pursue through our collection efforts. What we do is we submit notices to these businesses advising them that they have not paid their taxes. If they don't come forward and comply, we issue an estimated assessment. And as a result of that, those estimated assessments go through the collection process. In some cases, some of the businesses come forward and pay in the current year. Others do not, and we have to pursue it using the citywide collection agencies, our citywide collections unit, as well as our field and enforcement staff. So the percent of money that is collected through Office of Finance efforts, and that's through audits, enforcement, citywide collections, billing and collections, is about 25% of the business tax revenue. And what's projected for this fiscal year, I think it's about $416 million is what the CAO has budgeted, but about 25% of that is because it comes in through Office of Finance efforts. For the AB 63 program, which is a program that's been in place since November of 2002, the Office of Finance shares information, the city shares information with the Franchise Tax Board to identify businesses who have paid their state taxes, but may be operating a business in the city of Los Angeles and have not, registered and paid business taxes. That particular program to date has generated about $116 million to the city, and these are businesses that otherwise would not have come forward without the efforts of the Office of Finance, and that has resulted in about 133,000 discovered businesses that we have found through our efforts that are now on the city's tax rolls, where the money, they're now renewing annually. So if you encapsulate all of our efforts, taking into account the prior year monies that we're collecting through audits, through enforcement, through discovery, and then the accounts that we have discovered that are now renewing annually, just looking at fiscal year 08-09, and we will be presenting that information to the mayor and council, it was about $129 million that Office of Finance was responsible for the previous fiscal year. $452 million was collected overall, of which $129 million was actually due to the Office of Finance efforts. That includes the $57 million that I spoke about earlier, in addition to the other money. So it's substantial, and we certainly support getting an incentive to have a percentage of that go back to our efforts to help us retain revenue-generating positions and resources to improve upon our operation utilizing technology.
Okay. Also, could you give us, if it's kind of crystallized at this point, you're making some effort with AB 63 type relationships with the Franchise Tax Board, and I believe with the county tax assessor. Have we made any success on those two?
We are in contact with the county tax assessor's office. I don't have an update just yet, but I know that my staff did speak to an individual there, and we're looking at what additional information they might have that could help us in terms of identifying uncollected taxes or businesses that have not come forward and paid their share of the documentary transfer tax, as well as business taxes. On the Franchise Tax Board side, sir, that's actually dealing with AB 63. That's where we share information there. We are also partnering with the State Board of Equalization, and they actually collect the sales tax, and so we are working closely with their operation to see how we could share data that would not only help the city of Los Angeles, but also help the state of California.
Okay. And then also, you gave a brief comment on the secondary collectors. Could you give us an overview of the whole system with the primaries, secondaries, and the number of cases, and what their collection rate is, and their length or life of their contracts?
Pam, you want to do that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Marks. Mr. Rosendahl for the first time. Mr. Rosendahl.
She's going to answer that. Let her answer that.
Thank you. I just want to
I'm going to have Ms. Mooney address that.
Then I'd have to remember it again.
Pam Mooney for the Office of Finance. As Antoinette mentioned, that accounts that become delinquent, if they're under $5,000, they go to one of our outside contracted agencies. If they're over $5,000, they come to our in-house staff that works very closely with the city attorney's office and tries to attempt collection. Currently, the contracts allow for these agencies to try to attempt collection for 12 months. At that time, it then is returned to the city and is returned to the resulting department. And at that time, then the departments can either evaluate to go forward with legal action or to submit to the Board of Review for write-off. The secondary effort, which is out to RFP right now, which Councilwoman Hahn had requested, we had 12 firms respond, and that we are right in the middle of trying to evaluate that. The proposals are distributed. There's a meeting underway, so they're evaluating. And so the plan is to, within the next month, award the contract and make sure that they have an additional 6 months. So this will augment the existing efforts. So they'll have 6 months in order to try and attempt collection. So we we do believe that this will result in money that the city is not getting right now.
Okay, well, Ms. Labange,
thank you, Mr. Rosen.
Thank you so much. Now I'm about to say 2 points. I love this. This is a great one, Mr. Garcetti and everybody else on. 2 questions. What portion of the amount is realistically collectible, and what portion should be considered for write-off due to legal or other practices?
We're actually going to be meeting with the CAO, city attorney, and in any other department that has an outstanding receivable to provide that information. We anticipate having something to your council by March 10th.
Very good. Next question is, I think, intriguing. A proposed initiative mechanism to share a portion of the amounts collected with city departments, including finance and city attorney, to enhance staffing to seek additional debt collection. I know our city attorney is out there right now collecting monies and forcing people to do things, and frankly, I don't want to see him cut 100 people. I want him to bring in the revenue that he's so able to do. How are we doing with that idea?
Well, we're looking forward to having this mechanism in place because we certainly city attorney's office could speak as well, but we think that that would help enhance our efforts to improve upon collections so that we would have a steady workforce of revenue-generating staff available to the city and the Office of Finance, and infrastructure that we might need, whether it's dealing with improvements with our tax system or databases that we could use to match against our tax system database to identify potentially unregistered businesses. As I've indicated, for fiscal year 0809, collectively, Office of Finance is responsible for generating over $129 million. If you look at it cumulatively since the Office of Finance has been in existence, and that's been since July 1st, 2000. Cumulatively, our office has been responsible for collecting over $800 million. So we're very much looking forward to having a mechanism in place to allow for some of the monies to be utilized to benefit the city overall in improving upon collections.
Beautiful. City Attorney, could you respond to?
Well, I guess in terms of the numbers that we believe, the figures we can collect, I think we are working with the Office of Finance to identify of the cases we have, how many are audited and how many are estimated assessments. And once we've completed that, I think we'll be in a much better position to come back and give you a dollar amount or an estimate of a dollar amount. As to your second question, absolutely, I think the city attorney is committed 1,000% to doing whatever can be done to collect the money that is due and owing to the city. And to that end, he recently assigned 3 additional attorneys to our collections unit to assist with collection matters. I will point out, however, that a number of those attorneys are on the potential layoff list. So I think it's very important to keep the attorneys in place. I think one of the things that would be very helpful to us that we don't currently have is an investigator. I think that you're absolutely right to the extent that we have some of the money that we collect allocated to our office or allocated to the Office of Finance. It would enable us to basically enhance and continue to expand our collection efforts. So I believe it would more than pay for itself. But specifically right now, having an investigator to assist us in tracking down assets for all the default judgments that we have. We're attempting to do what we can on our own, but it would be very, very helpful to have an investigator with that specific expertise come in and assist in collecting the default judgments.
Well, I can tell you flat out, I support our city attorney on this. These people will not only pay for their own salary, but they generate revenue for the city. Thank you.
Mr. Rosendahl, thank you very much. From the 15th District, Councilwoman Janice Hahn. Repeat, from the 15th District, Councilwoman Janice Hahn. Janice Hahn, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You got one applause out there, Janice.
Thank you.
You got more. That's good there. Thank you, Janice.
Don't cut them off. Don't cut them off. Don't cut them off. They can clap as long as they want. Okay, I was actually I pushed my button after you began to talk about the RFP on the collections, the secondary collection. So 23 firms have responded. Is that correct? 12. I'm sorry, 12. And how many are we going to pick?
I think that we would pick multiple firms. We don't have a number in mind. We're looking at the proposals, and anything that is responsive, we found that it's good to have competition, and that we have, of our 4 firms that we have now, we have one that's local, we have some of them that are very large, and others that are small and more specialized. So it will depend on the nature of their proposal.
And when do you think they'll be awarded these contracts and they can start collecting this money?
We are trying to get it awarded within 30 days, so we would be coming back. I mean, I expect the review process not to be too lengthy.
I mean, I know we talk a lot about collections, but certainly, I mean, it's not going to be the panacea of closing our budget gap. But I think there were many of us who felt like we ought to do everything we can to try to collect the money that we can collect. And I think giving it to some other firms, smaller firms who, particularly in these tough economic times, may be hungry, to really work hard on this. I think it can't be bad. I think it'll be good for us. The other thing I was going to ask was about the DOT collections. I know we have a firm that does that.
Yes.
And their contract is like 5 years. But by the time that contract is up, that debt is probably ready to be written off. Is that accurate?
I think
if they haven't collected it.
The department, I believe, can speak better to this, but from our review in general, what we found is that the 5-year time frame is much too long. If you wait until 5 years, then yes, most of that is going to be uncollectible.
So what are we doing to change that?
What we're hoping is that in the new contract that's awarded, that we will speed up the time frame. Right now, it takes 2 years for the city to receive approximately 85%. We're hoping that we can accelerate that time frame so that if there isn't collection within the first, say, 15 months, that then it would go to collection, another firm, so that we could try and get...
These firms that we're bringing on board.
Exactly. So,
when will that process change?
The DOT is in the middle of an RFP, I believe, drafting, so I'm not sure if
I think
they're
we
here.
have a representative from DOT here.
Oh, good. Great.
Good morning, Robert Andalone, Department of Transportation. I believe your question is, when will the process change? We're in the process now of writing the RFP, and over the number of months that we've been working with the Office of Finance, we found that there's probably a different way of doing the business model, and that includes providing different options when these uncollected citations could be assigned to a different collector. So based on pricing options...
Although we do know that collecting through DOT requires some special security things and a partnership with DMV. Is that... Well, I mean, not any collection firm can collect.
No. Part of the problem is that based upon our current legal information, we cannot share the registered owner name and address with a secondary collection agency.
Unless they go through some sort of training, I believe.
Well, from what I understand from DMV is that they have to have a requester ID code assigned to them.
Right, which that's not unachievable.
No, it's nothing is unachievable.
Right. Because I think before we've been caught in this, only one firm could do it because they had all the credentials, they had this special relationship with DMV, but I think that shouldn't stop us from...
No, there's nothing that stops us from it. I think once the secondary collection firms have a DMV requester code ID, we would work out the logistics of transferring the data and then receiving timely updates from them, preferably real time, so that if we do receive notice that they have been paid, that we don't use the uncollected status to perhaps either boot or impound their vehicles.
Right.
So I think from the customer service perspective, we want to make sure that we're in line as far as the receipt of information.
Right.
So to answer your question, yes, in the next RFP, there will be a number of pricing options that will allow for earlier assignment to special collections to a secondary firm or even a third.
I mean, obviously they'll do two things. It will make the primary firm work harder to get that debt in the shorter period of time.
Yes.
And it will also give an opportunity for these secondary collections agencies to also participate. Ultimately, I think it'll bring more money into the city.
Well, that's our hope.
Thank you. So, full speed ahead.
Full speed ahead, Ms. Hahn. Thank you very much. Mr. Garcetti.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you all for this vigorous discussion. I want to say this politely. I fear that we might have turned this into a working group meeting, which is not the intention here. And the working groups are actually producing stuff, and it's good for the public to see just how complex some of these issues are, because it's easy to say, why don't we have 400 million or 500 million yesterday? But we're really doing the hard work, and the very same city employees that we're talking about in terms of next year's budget are doing some of the same work right now, and I want to appreciate them and appreciate you. I think what's important and what we've asked for, and really we're going to task the CAO with, and will not be easy on the CAO about, is putting in a number for this, because at the end of the day, we have to budget. We have folks, I know Mr. Koretz and Mr. Alacon are not here today, they've talked about why can't we, instead of moving forward on other options the CEO has put forward, why can't we just get $400 million and plug the budget hole that way? I think we're beginning to see that that's not a realistic number, but I think they believe as much as everybody around here in getting a realistic number. So I think it's safe for this fiscal year to maybe look at $3 million additional that we are going to get from the work of the city attorney's office. We need to count on that. We may be able to have a couple million more in a couple other locations. That's maybe about $5 million this year, and then I think looking at next year, we can begin to peg that at maybe a 15 or 20 million above and beyond, and that's through a lot of really hard work. So for the public that's watching and says, why isn't debt being collected? Debt is a very difficult thing to collect. The private sector has the same problem. We need to be tougher at the front end, so we're not there, but many times it's indigent folks who get picked up by an ambulance. Yes, there's a charge attached, but we can call it debt. It's never coming to this city, and we're not going to stop picking people up just because they're so poor they can't pay. When we look at parking tickets, there are people who have left California a long time ago, no longer live here. It's on their credit rating, and they can live with that, but they're not giving us a dime back. So some of the things that we're going to be looking at doing is plugging realistic numbers in. This is going to come up in a moment with our contracts, too. But I think I would feel comfortable, and when the news asks, what are we doing in here, what have we done? Well, the work that we asked to happen, and it didn't just start 2 months ago, but that we've been continually doing on debt, will probably yield about $5 million more this year. That's another 50 bodies of people to put a human face on that we will help preserve here in the city of Los Angeles. If we can do that for next year, it may be as many as another 20 people. Sorry, wait, $5 million is 50 people, excuse me, and then 20 million would be something like 200 people. So we thank you for the work that you're doing, colleagues. I'd ask that we work with the CAO. I think the CAO should be able to plug that number in with the budget chair and make sure that we get that, because we're keeping a running tally of what the work we've done here, and next week we'll be able to announce. I know Mr. Huizar said, what is that number? I want to know, what is that number? We're pulling our hair out. We know we're having good discussions. We know we're saying go get things done, but we're not getting the numbers back as precisely as we want. And the same thing with our contracts, which Ms. Hahn, I know, is going to speak on. A number of us are going to speak on, too. We want to arrive at those numbers today, have a realistic number, and put those in for what we can expect for this year. So with that, I thank everybody for their work on this, and please continue to bring us good news. We will reward those departments that bring us new monies. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Parks, the center table, please stay there. Mr. Parks is passed. Okay, this completes this item. No one else on the queue? And okay, I don't have a card for you. I'm sorry. Hearing was already held. Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, do you wish to vote on this item?
Yeah, I think we should vote on this item. So, open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay. Next item.
Not one, sorry, number 3.
Number 3.
Ms. Hahn's motion on number 3 is what's before us, the contract layoff list. We'll let Ms. Hahn open. I know the CAO can address that as well. Ms. Hahn?
Okay, what do you want me to do?
Well, first of all, say, do we have...
It's not the motion, it's the report back from the motion, because the motion was adopted previously, so there's a report back on it.
Good morning. Miguel Santana, City Administrative Officer. Can't hear? Okay. As part of the FSR, we had recommended that we pursue 10% reductions in all contracts, and since then there's been a number of other motions on that topic. We're here to report on the status of that. One of the things that makes this a little complicated is that the city doesn't have one centralized system that tracks all contracts citywide. And so in the day that we're in a situation to invest in ourselves, that would be a worthwhile investment so that we can maintain a better way of tracking the kinds of contracts that we have citywide. So what we've been doing is that we've been asking each department to report back on their contracts and begin the process of negotiating a 10% reduction. We've also asked them to look at which contracts they could actually eliminate and to establish the contract layoff list as was directed last week, not just for this year, but for ongoing years. Part of what makes this complicated is that there's multiple accounts in which contracts are given. Last week there was a discussion of over $2 billion available in contracts. To refine that number further, that $2 billion represents all the contracts, anything that does not include salaries. So, for example, what we pay our insurance companies for our own health care benefits, our utility bills, all of the costs associated to the city government beyond just salaries, and it did not represent the general fund. The more specific account that we recommend looking at and that we've asked departments to look at is contractual services, which is account 3040. In that account, there's $151 million. So a 10% reduction represent approximately $15 million. That is our target, what we're hoping to see come back and what we hope to plug in for next year's budget. What we've asked departments to do as we meet with them, with the mayor's office in preparation of next year's budget, is that we actually identify in the budget where that contract reduction will be and how much it represents. One, so that we could track that it gets done, and two, we could see how it offsets any further reductions in staff that would have resulted had we not had that particular reduction. The kinds of contracts that exist in this account include everything from zoo advertising to the controller audits to maintenance to leases for equipment, including the fire department helitanker. What most departments have been doing is, I would speak for one department, they actually brought in all their contractors, sat them down, and asked all of them to consider a reduction. We had a department head meeting on Monday where we walked them through the process, and Gary reported that there was a very positive response from the contractors. To clarify the legal issues, which I think was an issue raised last week, we've asked the city attorney to work with our office to establish a workshop so that all departments have one place to go to clarify any legal issues that they may have. That way it's the process to reduce these contracts doesn't get held up due to legal questions, and to ensure that we're providing a consistent way of doing it across the board. So we anticipate, based on the contract layoff list that was directed by our office, by your council, we've asked each department to provide us a list by March 11th, and we'll have a sense of what that is soon after that. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. So one of my first questions you already answered was, is there one central database for all of our contracts? No. That's something that I think, would obviously help us would have helped us as we're kind of going through this process. So basically, each department is allowed to contract out in any way they see possible.
That's correct.
So there's no oversight. There's no general tracking of these. Do we know all the contracts that have been let out at this point?
That information is due to us this week.
That's what we're doing. Okay.
Right.
Do we? Are we? My motion was obviously, if we've got an employee layoff list, we should have a contractor layoff list. And part of what I wanted was beginning to identify, whether it was from your office, but it sounds like now it should be from each of the departments, not only whether or not their contractors will take a 10% cuts, but can they start identifying maybe the ones that are the most expensive, are the ones that we could, eliminate. That's kind of what we were hoping to get. And more importantly, we really are hoping that you have someone on your staff that is really detailed, scrubbing all these contracts, first and foremost, to see whether or not our own city employees could be doing this work. I mean, that's really that's so important right now. And I think we're beginning, we're doing it sounds piecemeal. I think we're going to find a way through Public Works to hire the tree trimmers with the Harbor Department and with DWP. That's exactly what we're talking about. Exactly what we're talking about. But we think there's more of those out there, and that's really what we want you to do.
Okay.
And in good times, contracting out, according to our city charter, we can contract out if it's more efficient and it's more cost effective. There's always a debate about that, I think, from city workers, whether or not that's true, but there are certain specialized contracts that our city employees have been unable to fill. But we think there's a lot out there that it sounded like a good idea at the time, but now things are very different. And we want to make sure that if a city employee can do it, that city employee is doing it. And that's what I want to see, that's what I want to find out, and I want that really to be a priority right now as we go through this. And then ultimately, I think we need a better way to track these contracts.
I agree.
We need a better way to track the contract and the contractors. There's a story going around that at the Hyperion, there was a 15-year PIN given to an employee before they realized that it was a contractor. So, those are kind of the stories that come back. And we just, again, it's kind of a funny story, but not really.
Right.
And hopefully as we go through this and on the other side of this crisis, we'll have a much better way to track these contracts throughout the city of Los Angeles.
I agree. I think having one system is critical. I know that at the county, it took several years to put one system, but there is one system where you could go in and actually capture all the information on the contracts. Before I left the county, we actually engaged in a similar kind of exercise to find ways of reducing. And in that particular case, we looked at extending contracts for 1 year if they had agreed to a reduction. And so in this case, in the city, we're being much more aggressive. We're not necessarily granting an extension. We're simply saying we need a 10% reduction. And from what departments are reporting, for the most part, there's been a positive response from most of our contractors.
Right. And the other thing we need to track is what's the actual cost of these contracts versus the bid costs. I mean, there's a bid proposal, we accept it, we let out the contract, and then is there any tracking back on what was the actual cost with change orders? And I think that's something we got to get a handle on, too, as we move forward.
Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Miguel, one of the things I think we've had a lot of conversation about contracts and whether we could move the money around or also put city employees. Could you take us through the charter section 1022 that is required before you even get to the contract and what findings we have to make and who makes those findings?
Are you familiar with that? I mean, part of the process is we have to establish that it's actually more cost efficient to do it through a contract than to do it internally.
So you have to do that before you even let the contract.
That is correct. It's to ensure that we're engaging in contracting not just for the sake of contracting, but we actually have to determine that this contract would be cheaper and more effective than having a city employee do that work.
Is there some personnel function to look at contracts in 1022 also? Personnel department?
Todd Bowie with CAO. Yes, the personnel department will conduct a review prior to moving forward on any contracts.
Okay, what is their review?
They have a sheet that they'll go through. They'll check off various boxes. Is this a classification that exists in the city? Is this work that city workers could do? Are there sufficient authorities to do it? Those types of questions. on that sheet, and then based on that, they'll make a finding that maybe city employees could do the work, but sufficient resources weren't available, or city employees couldn't do the work, et cetera.
So it's a two-part process. The Personnel Department has to see whether there's classifications readily available, city employees, and then secondarily, the CAO has to look at it on the basis of whether there's enough, whether it's cheaper, and whether there's funding to even let the contract.
That's correct.
Okay, so Miguel, is it between you and what general services that determines if a contract is let?
We do the primary analysis, it's my understanding. Does general services also do it?
For the 1022, I believe that also personnel does their 1022 process, and to at least to some extent, our office reviews that as well. I don't know the full extent, though.
Okay, and Miguel, in general, would you say that before we let a contract, there's a number of people that made a decision whether the contract is not only meets 1022, but is it valid that we're spending money for whatever the service we're asking for?
That is correct, and that's part of the analysis that's presented to your council prior to approval.
Okay, so when you go back and scrub the budget and you look at unencumbered money, it may be contracts that people haven't spent the money, but are we making a determination that the contract wasn't necessary when you make that decision? Or is it strictly a financial decision of recovering funds?
Well, when we go back and sort of sweep any unspent dollars, the question we ask is, why is that? Is it that the work is still pending, or is there a conclusion that the work was completed at a lesser amount than what we anticipated? So that's part of the exercise that my office goes through prior to sweeping of those dollars.
Okay. The one thing I'd ask, and I think it goes back to what we discussed before, and asking the 10% cut, and also looking at whether we eliminate contracts. What I would like to make sure that goes hand in hand, so there's no misunderstanding, that whatever success rate you have, we understand what the cost of that is. If you have value engineered a project, have you gotten less services for the 10% cutback? If you eliminate a contract, what isn't expected to be done? So that later we will not go forward thinking something is going on in the city and find out later a contract was pulled, or we got less services for what we basically initially funded.
And that's a good point. We did ask, as part of the report back from departments, that if a contractor says, yes, I'm willing to accept the 10%, but it means that I can't do the following things, that they be clear about that. And so that your council understands what is it that we're foregoing to reduce that contract. In many of those cases, it may make sense. There are things that we can accept as not being completed. In other cases, it may not be acceptable. So that's part of the analysis that a report back that we're getting back from the departments as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we can pause this item for a moment and take up item 1. We've had a hearing on this already. If we could please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved and goes through on the first reading. Thank you to the department, and we'll send that forthwith. Thank you, Mr. Freeman, and thank you to the department for your patience while we had 12 members here on that. Also on item 7, Ms. Hahn had an amendment. If we can reconsider that, it's a friendly amendment. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote. And as amended, Ms. Hahn,
11 ayes.
Item 7 now. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, and come on back, all the folks that were at the table, don't be shy. I'm sorry, the queue we had next, I believe, Mr. Cardenas, Mr. LaBonge passed. So Mr. Cardenas is our next speaker.
Yeah, if the staff could come back. The CAO left? Wow, that was quick.
They went to lunch really quickly.
It's not even lunchtime yet.
They saw the opening.
Well, for now, a question of the Personnel Department. What involvement does the Personnel Department have when it comes to reviewing whether or not we should be contracting out a particular service?
I don't know if there's anyone here from the personnel department to speak to that, but they don't necessarily make a recommendation on whether or not the city should be contracting, just a determination as to whether or not city employees are in a position to do the work that's being requested.
Okay, now, I think that it's easy for us to assume that if you have an able-bodied human being who works for the city, well, they can do the work. But it's not as simple as whether or not that particular person can do the work. Doesn't it have to do also with, first of all, sometimes where the source of the money is? If it's a grant or what have you, and the grant is only for 3 years, when we hire people in the city of Los Angeles, generically, for example, a police officer, we're hiring a police officer assuming that their investment and our investment is hopefully a career. Not just, okay, I'm going to hang out as a cop for 3 years and then I'm just going to split. Or I'm going to do tree trimming for a couple of years and I'm going to split. When we open up a position and we hire somebody and then they become a civil servant, we have a commitment that they're going to hopefully stick around if they want to. And basically, as long as they're willing to stick around and they work hard, we're going to continue employing them if, in fact, we have the funds available. So my point is, sometimes do we contract out because of the source of funds or because the need for that particular activity is finite?
That's correct. We do make a feasibility determination or an economic determination as part of the 1022 process. And we can determine at some point that through the feasibility that this, as you were saying, this process is temporary or this activity is temporary, and it would be more feasible and make more sense to hire or contract out.
And also, aside from that, isn't it required that we take into consideration the overall cost of the activity, not just the cost of whether it's an employee of ours or if some contractor has people doing the work?
That part of the 1022 process, it's a little more complex. That we have made certain determinations on how the 1022 process should work, and we've kind of had that approved or discussed that with our unions as well.
For example, let me give you an example. Say the city of Los Angeles needs something to be done, and it requires a machine that's a $100 million machine, okay? And the city of Los Angeles has some talent within the bodies of people already in the city, say mechanics or something like that they could probably adapt to that pretty quick and actually do the work had we had a $100 million machine that we've invested in, or had $100 million to go invest in that machine and then put these people to work on that project. If that particular activity or service requirement requires that kind of investment, and we have to justify that we really don't have the money to invest in that $100 million, therefore, we will hire a private contractor who already has that $100 million machine, and then they will take care of that activity. Is that an example of what could justify contracting out?
Yes.
I mean, I think it's not only whether we have the capital to be able to purchase that machine, but whether we need that machine for a full
Say we
year.
need it for, exactly. Say we only need this activity last 2 years. Who in their right mind would invest in a $100 million machine, right, for 2 years worth of work, and we're sitting there with a $100 million machine that's collecting dust?
Right. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rosendahl.
It's crucial that we not only ensure.
Apologize for that moment there. I'd just like to sum it up for us, okay, because I get a little confused with all this stuff. We're talking about a priority list of city general fund contracts which can be immediately terminated in order to make available additional funds to address the budget crisis and open possible jobs to be filled by general funded employees, effectively creating a contract layoff list. Explain that in layman's terms to me.
We're talking about establishing, number one, asking all of our contractors to take a 10% cut so that to generate savings for the general fund, and in turn those savings could help mitigate any cuts that we have to make, and hopefully also mitigate any layoffs that we have to engage in. The second thing is, not only are we...
And just on that one point, do you have any idea how much money we might be talking about?
We're talking about about $15 million for the entire fiscal year that's coming up as a maximum target. You know, some of these contracts may not be, we're asking this to be done on a voluntary basis. Because we have already established a contract. The vendors, for the most part, have been fairly responsive, and most of them have, at least from what we've been hearing, have been willing and able to make that kind of reduction. The second thing we're being asked to do is actually look at some of these contracts and ask, do we still need to do this work? Is it absolutely critical that we have this contract? Maybe it was a priority 5 years ago, maybe it's not a priority now. And can we actually eliminate this contract, generate the savings, and redirect those savings back into our general fund to, again, mitigate any further reductions and hopefully avoid any additional layoffs?
Sounds good. How much money do you think on that one?
That I can't answer you because we asked the departments to come back by next week and give us a sense of what that looks like.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendahl. There's no further speakers in the queue.
And Madam President, this item is just a report back, so there's no action required on this one.
All right. So thank you for the report back, and we'll go on to the next item.
And I believe that was number 4, and there are cards on this as well. And this would be the same type thing. It's a report back with no action.
All right. Mr. Sachs. Mr. Sachs. Arnold Sachs.
Item 4. Item 4, right? Item 4. Okay, contracts. 10% cut. So let's see. How about personal contracts that the city council members put out for their staff members? Are they fall under this 10% cut? How about transferred contracts, like you had with the LA Marathon, where the contract went to one company and they transferred the rights to the Frank McCourt Company? Can you clarify that, Councilman Parks? Do they fall under who would pay the 10% on that? Would it be the transferred contract holder or the original contract holder who doesn't have the contract anymore? And how many contracts are like that in the city? And finally, the market value. When the city doesn't get market value for its property or its contracts, like at the airport with the administrative services contract for the taxi company that has airport property they used to get money from a lunch wagon that's using city property. There's no contract with the city or these companies, and they're getting money, $500,000 a year in this contract. Who gets the 10% on that? The city's not involved. It's a private, supposedly nonprofit company, and they're using city property, and the city is losing that $500,000 a year. Who gets a 10% cut on that? Personal contracts, like some council members have with their staff members, do they fall under this? I know that I heard that the staff members took a cut in their paychecks. And the contracts. What's the difference between the contracts that are cut and the services that are saved with contracted workers regarding
Mr. Sachs.
Personal benefits?
I have a card for Mr. Zine, but Mr. Zine is not present, so there's some confusion here, so I'll put this card aside. The card is Mr. Zine. Mr. Zine's not here. Thank you. Mr. Zine's not here. If Mr. Matthew Dowd would like to fill out a card, and you can, if your name is Mr. If you, Mr. Dowd, if you'd like to speak, you can fill out a card for the record. Go ahead and speak now, and you can fill a card out afterwards.
I understand the comments are legal.
Please identify yourself for
But
the
this
record.
is what I want to talk about, the dumb inefficiencies that are obviously apparent in the city of Los Angeles. There's a speaker card with a name, just call the name. And it proves you're not listening. And that's what I want to talk about here. The city council does not listen. I'm getting madder by the day because you're proving it all the time. Tom LaBonge was up there.
Please
The
stop
speaker's
talking.
not talking about item number 4.
I'm talking directly about
If you
item
would
number
please
4.
stay on topic, so
I'm talking
otherwise
about
I'll-
the procedure that you take here
You
to
need to talk
do
about
these
the
things.
substance of
And
the
this
item,
is one
Mr.
of the
Dowd.
things you're doing.
Mr. Dowd, please speak on the substance of the item. Okay, go ahead and start his clock.
See, the outlook is not optimistic for this item. Okay? The whole economic outlook is not optimistic. So you're trying to expect people that you've probably screwed over because, see, this is what I want to talk about with the city of Los Angeles. You're going to try and expect outside people to reduce their contracts with you. And yet over the years, even when times are good, you're mean to the little guy and to the businesses. And there's no mitigation and there's no settlements, and you drive people to the point. That's why they have a podium and these people come here to talk to you like this. And then you turn around when you're screwed and expect them to cut their contracts with you. You know, why don't you cut David Freeman's contract by 10%? That's an outside contract. And he sat here for 2 hours doing nothing, no laptop, no BlackBerry, no nothing. And then you just voted his item and Dennis Zine wasn't here. That's why. And Dennis Zine doesn't listen.
Thank you very much. All right, Madam Clerk, Mr. Cardenas is in the queue. Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Cardenas, you're in the queue. Just you.
I just want, I don't need the staff to come up, but I just want them to hear this. If somebody offers to reduce their contract, I applaud that. I don't want to discourage that or what have you. But I think it's incumbent upon the city to make sure that if they cut their contract by 5% voluntarily, 10% voluntarily, that they don't, at the same time, without telling us, get rid of some of their subcontractors and save that money that way, when during the process we're asking them to please look at local smaller businesses and try to create that synergy and actually contract out parts of this work. And at the same time, I don't want to find out later on that all of a sudden we start getting complaints by a bunch of small subcontractors saying, you know, we got cut from the job. And then we say, well, what do you mean you got cut from the job? Well, the general contractor said that they cut out 8% of what they charged you, and then as a result, they got rid of us. I don't want to have inadvertent cause and effect that we're at least not aware of. And I certainly don't want to be a part of that. I certainly want to save money for the city if somebody wants to do it voluntarily. But like they say a lot of times, sometimes the devil's in the details. So when it comes to the subcontractors, I hope that they're not punished or gotten rid of because somebody wants to look good to the city. In addition to that, I want to make sure that we understand that I think one of the council members said, well, is there any way that we could, if somebody actually reduces their contract by a certain percentage, the next time they bid with the city, can they get extra points? Well, I've been thinking about that a lot, and maybe somebody has a contract of maybe $200,000, and they cut 10%, right? So we save 20 grand. That's great. But then all of a sudden they bid a job for $20 million, and all of a sudden they get more points than the person who actually bid less than them. And the bid difference might be $500,000, but because of their point score, they end up costing the city an additional $300,000. So we have to be very careful. I know we want to save money, and we should, and it's my understanding that there are some contractors that have voluntarily cut their contract with us and reduced the amount of money that we owe them without reducing the service. But I want to make sure that we also are aware of those things as well. Yes, let's encourage and ask people that if they can unilaterally adjust the contract out of the goodness of their heart to do so. But at the same time, I think it's wrong for us to not understand and dialogue with these contractors to make sure that they're not doing things that are inconsistent with what we've been asking of them. And the reason why they did it is because we didn't bother to ask the tertiary questions. I just wanted to make sure that we're aware of those potential issues, and I encourage and hope that we do get reductions and savings anywhere that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. No further speakers in the queue. Madam Clerk, please open the roll.
And I'm sorry, Madam President, on this one, this is just a report back, so there's no action
All
required
right,
on this
thank
one
you.
as well.
Let's go on to the next item.
Next one is number 5, and that was called special when Mr. Garcetti was going through the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, and I don't know if actually anyone has any questions on this one.
There are no speakers in the queue on that. Yeah, we just open the roll on that. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Next item.
Next item is item number 6, and that was also called special by Councilmember Garcetti, and I don't believe there are any cards on that one as well.
Okay, let's open the roll on that. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes. And then item number 2 was called special for cards, and this is just another item that's no action required on that, but there are cards on this.
All right, let's have the speakers. We have quite a few cards on item number 2. So I'm going to call your names out. You can come up 3 at a time. Chris Flagg. Is Chris Flagg here? Eric Calhoun. And Fred Burnett. Fred Burnett, are you here? Okay, that's Chris Flagg, Eric Calhoun, and Fred Burnett, and Teresa Isaias. Why don't you come on up?
Good morning, Council. My name is Eric Calhoun. I'm an employee of Recreation and Parks. I'm speaking on behalf of the 125 employees that are on the mayor's layoff list from our department. These employees are frontline workers who provide direct service to the thousands of families in Los Angeles. Of this group, 89 employees work at our child care facilities throughout the city. This layoff will eliminate our licensed child care program at 24 of 26 of our parks. Most of these sites are the only affordable child care sites in their communities. These sites provide care for preschool-aged and elementary-aged children, which a majority of these children are under the age of 7. It has been mentioned that private partnerships would be established with organizations like Boys and Girls Club or YMCA, but these organizations do not provide care for children under the age of 7. So these closures would basically eliminate the only programs available for these Los Angeles citizens. There are many grants available to the city that are not being sought after that could assist the city with providing these services to the families with the greatest need, such as the ACES grant, the 21st Century Grant, the American Recovery Act, or the Child Care Block Grant 93.575. Likewise, our department incurs one of the largest, if not the largest, utility bill of any city department. These utilities absorb a large amount of the department's budget. Employees and community members have commented to me about installing natural resource recovery technology at our facilities. We have gyms with flat roofs that solar panels can be installed and reduce the department's utility budget, which would increase funds for community programs and create clean energy that could be sold by DWP to its customers.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Isaias? Mr. Cardenas, yes.
Well, just a small point of clarification. I thought the gentleman mentioned YMCAs don't take care of kids under the age of 7. But anyway, there's a YMCA in my district, and I've hung out there and met the little kids, and they have preschool and all kinds of little things where they have little kids. So at least the one in my district does.
Hi, my name is Teresa Isais. I'm a member of AFSCME Local 3090 and a clerk for the LA Public Library. The library is the department that is being the hardest hit with layoffs. What will happen will be that you will basically gut it. Due to layoffs, there will be reduced hours, there will be library closures, there will be increased stress on a minimal staff that's trying desperately to meet the needs of an increased library attendance. I have to say to the council that no matter what your intentions are, and I think that they are honorable and I understand about the budget, but whatever your intentions are, the outcome of these layoffs is going to be that you will collectively send a message to the citizenry of this city that their education, that an educated and informed citizenry is not important to you. And I object to that. Library staff daily work diligently. We are well trained to do exactly the opposite of that. We are helping to educate children. We provide services for young children, for early reading programs, for enrichment programs, for teens. We offer a safe place to study. We offer resources that many of them are not able to get at home. If you want a true democracy, it is absolutely contingent on an informed citizenry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Zine, Corinda Humphrey, Teresa Webster, and Verdell Flores.
Yes, thank you, Princess Zine, again. So look, let me talk now about some of the things that are going to be required, and for city employees, it's already too late. A lot of these things are already too late, and see, here's the problem with the city, and it's the same problem that you have with the federal government and Wall Street, is that all these firms that you expect to get revenue from in downtown here, first of all, like AEG, they're broke. You wrecked it. It's all over. They're all leveraged. So, see, when we're talking about revenue for the city, I think you need to underestimate and not overestimate, first of all. I'm glad we had the DOT in here, but see, I didn't hear any talk about incentives. If you're going to talk about fixing the budget, let's get some real incentives out there, like for parking tickets and citations. I've talked about this before. Let's be different, innovative. Don't copy every other city down the hole that you're already in. But the people who are here, who have ideas, you just choose to do nothing. There's too much talk. And you need to instruct these departments to get on, and we waste way too much time here all just saying the same thing. I'm watching it on Channel 35 yesterday. Dennis Zine is asking about TRAN money and paying the pension money in advance. Bernie Parks stood and talked about that 3 months ago, why we pay the pension money up front. But Dennis Zine, 3 months later, why do we pay the pension money? Can you tell me?
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Corinda Humphrey. I have been a young adult librarian at the Junipero Serra branch at 46th and Main in Miss Perry's district for 5 years. I serve teens from 6th grade through 12th grade. A lot of these students do not have a disposable income. A lot of my students go to Santee. They do not have bus fare. Some of them walk all the way from downtown back to 46th Street after school from Santee. They're mostly latchkey kids. And when they come to the library, they're there for 8 hours. And if it's Wednesday, they're there for 10 hours when they are off track. They are using the internet, they are socializing, they are reading. Some of them are doing their homework, they are reading some books, some of them are checking things out, some of them are getting books on how to take the SAT, participating in the college prep workshops that we're offering for free at all of our branches. We are providing entertainment as well as moral support. I do not see these children's parents. They are at my library 8 to 10 hours a day, however long we are open, and I do not see a parent, okay? I know their name. I talk to them all day. So I'm asking you to support the library, because if layoffs occur, already the school system is cutting some school library positions, the public libraries are closing, the parks are closing. I don't know where these teens are going to go. So I'm asking you for the services in my neighborhood where I serve at 46th and Main in Ms. Perry's district, that there isn't an arcade, there isn't a bookstore, there isn't somewhere for them to go. They do not have money to buy things on Amazon. They do not have cable. They do not have broadband. They do not have internet. So please support the library and do not gut our library system by laying off these employees. Please see our website at savethelibrary.org. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Teresa Webster, and I'm a young adult librarian that works in Teenscape at Central Library. I'm actually the librarian 3, so I am a subject specialist for young adults. I need for you to be aware of the fact that our library system plays a vital role in eliminating the digital divide that exists in this nation. LA is not a wealthy city, all right? We have many residents that cannot afford to provide PCs in their homes for their kids to use to do their homework, and so we provide that resource free to everyone, not just our students, but to adults. We offer free computer classes. We offer programs after school for the young adults as well as the children. We offer assistance with our school district, LA Unified, as well as the private schools. I also work with schools in Ventura County as well as Orange County. We also provide, as Corinda mentioned, SAT assistance, practice SAT tests, practice ACT tests. We are doing our part to support our young adults and send them off to college. We want them to be vital citizens to help with our economic base in this city. But if you got our library, as has been mentioned, that's not going to happen. We are not going to have kids going off to college. Instead, we're going to have more kids dropping out of school. We're going to have more kids joining gangs. We're going to have more kids dying young. We're going to have more kids going to prison. And if you'd rather invest in building more prisons, then go for it and go ahead and kill the city of Los Angeles. Because we are not going to have an educated mass. We're not going to have people that are going to be able to go out and vote, and they're not going to be voting intelligently. And already we've seen the effects of that when you look at this city and this state's government system, and that says quite a bit. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Please remember, digital divide, the youth, the future of this city, the future of this nation. Do your part, support our library. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Verdell Flores. I'm a half-time adult librarian at the Mar Vista branch. And in the paper, I read that Councilman LaBonge singled out the Mar Vista branch, stating that it cost $1 million to operate my branch. I say, so what? That $1 million, if that is truly a realistic number, is a small price to pay for the services we provide to Councilman Rosenthal's constituents. We service a community of affluence that resides in the hills and a vast community from the project area bordering Bologna Creek, not to mention the Venice homeless and the residents of Santa Monica. Nannies and their charges, as well as mothers and their children, as many as 30 attend our weekly story times. Our afternoons find the tables in the children's and the YA rooms overflowing with students and tutors. And our monthly resume class that used to bring in 1 or 2 attendees had a total of 9 last week. 9 unemployed residents looking for help. When times get tough, the tough get going, and they're going to the library. Libraries see their highest usage during times of economic distress, and this is a time of economic distress. Please stop bleeding the library. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Hillary George, Roy Stone. Is Hillary George still here? Hillary George, Roy Stone, Madeline Q. Is Madeline Q here? Candace Mack, Viha, and Keisha Taylor. Hillary George.
Hi, I'm Hillary George. I'm a children's librarian in the Hollywood region. And the first round of budget cuts is going to eliminate a lot of the newest, most enthusiastic, most motivated and innovative librarians who've been hired in the last couple of years, including myself. And I wanted to bring you a little bit of the magic we share with the kids. If I can get some of you who are sitting close to help me read the story, it's just going to take a minute. I'm going to read the left-hand side. You guys are going to read the right. It's called Yo, Yes. Yo. Hey. You. Yes, you. What's up? Why? Oh? No friends. Oh. Yes. Look. Me. Ah. Yes, me. Well. Yo. Yow. This is a story about friendship, race, community, reading, all things that are really important to our city, and that's what we bring to the children. So please go to saveourlibrary.org. Thanks.
Mr. Stone.
Good afternoon. Los Angeles Public Library has become one of the premier library systems in America, in the entire country, and it is about to be deconstructed. What is easy for you is to watch the mayor do his political maneuvering in the media, ignore the true cost and the true loss to Los Angeles, after our library is providing almost no services. Barely 750 staff members will be left. Let the CAO and mayor order an additional 200-plus people fired, not laid off. People are fired. They're not coming back, as they have written in their report. Or do what's hard. Tell the CAO to go back and find the money in a $4 billion budget so that the library can continue to improve our community, to prevent crime, and our library staff can continue to uplift our Los Angeles culture. When our library faced the aftermath of 2 devastating fires at our central library many, many years ago, our mayor was Tom Bradley. He chose the harder path to find funding in a difficult time as it was then, and he rebuilt the jewel of our library system. This mayor, if you allow it, will tear down our library system so that it will never fully rise again. This is not rhetoric, it is the facts of a written plan. It is the January 29th plan by the CAO, approved by the mayor, and approved by this council. Only you can save the library, and only you can continue the social contract that has existed for almost 140 years between the city leadership and the people of Los Angeles. I hope you will take action.
Madeline Q.
Good morning. My name is Madeline Kerr. I'm a children's librarian in the Hollywood area. When I go to schools as part of my job, I've learned that most kids and even many teachers don't fully understand what we do as librarians and how vital and important libraries are. And my feeling is that in my heart, I wonder if you understand what we do as librarians every day. Because if you did, how could you implement the layoffs that constitute the largest cut of any public service department in the city and get behind the CAO's proposal that will effectively destroy the library in 5 years? I'm a children's librarian. I'm an educator. I instruct kids on how to find books. I recommend books. I read books. I read book reviews. I order books. I select books. I show them how to use the internet. I show them how to evaluate websites. I go to school and instruct this to hundreds of students. I show them the path of how they can achieve their dreams and goals. I read stories and sing and dance for more than 200 people a month. I teach pre-literacy skills to parents of babies, toddlers, preschoolers and their teachers. I have book clubs and art activities at my library every week that are packed with people. I have turned non-readers into readers. I repair books. I maintain my collection at my branch. I belong to committees that will better the work that we already do, and this isn't even all the work that I do. I'm a children's librarian, and my work empowers the youth of this city and their parents to be successful. Please don't rob them. This is important to have. And it's important to have people in libraries and libraries open to teach them and show them the tools to succeed. Thank you for your time.
Is Candace Mack? Candace Mack? Okay.
Hello, I'm Candace Mack, and I've been the teen librarian at the Encino Tarzana branch of LA Public Library since December of 2007, which means I'm a relatively new hire. I'm wearing this shirt today that says Celebrate Diversity at Your Library because I truly believe in it. This shirt refers to diversity of race, age, socioeconomic status, religious belief, and more found at the library. Most of all, it refers to the diversity of ideas that is celebrated by and found at the library. The library is also a place that celebrates the diversity of community. Long before you were ever called to jury duty or are old enough to vote, young Angelenos can find community at the library by attending our programs or becoming a teen volunteer. My 30 teen volunteers during the school week and 60 teen volunteers during the summer weeks gain leadership, job skills, and ownership of their city and civic duty by helping patrons find books, helping kids during crafts programs and story times, signing kids up for summer reading programs, and helping to plan teen library events. What does it say about our city if my position is cut or our hours shortened or our branch closes? These young Angelenos are our city's future, and they and their parents, your constituents, need our library now more than ever. I have a stack of testimonials here that are written from your constituents that I invite you to look at, that tell of the value of the library to the city. Please go to www.savethelibrary.org to find out more about how everyone can save the library. Councilman Hahn, I thank you for your ideas on reducing contract workers. And Councilman Cardenas, I'm not sure if you're still here. I'm sorry. I just want to ask why you feel our subcontractors are more important than our city employees. Thank you.
President, point of personal privilege. I never said that the subcontractor workers are more important than city workers, and I tried to be very careful of explaining over and over and over just about the carefulness about whatever it is we do here. So just for the people watching who didn't see me speak earlier, I never said that, I never meant it, and it's not part of me to think that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. All right, Viha.
Good morning. My name is V. Ha. I'm the young adult librarian at the Lincoln Heights Branch Library. The library is located in District 1. Good morning, Mr. Ed Reyes. 2 weeks ago, I listed the budget consequences of the library. Today, I will describe a sample day at the library to show that I am a positive influence in aiding the community of Lincoln Heights. 1. Kids and teens have a positive relationship with an adult, myself, to encourage future success. 2. Adults have a source for help in finding information and entertainment resources. 3. Because the library is staffed, it is a safe haven for all. On Tuesday, I went to Griffin Avenue Elementary School to celebrate Dr. Seuss's birthday. I talked about the wonders of reading, the horror of nightmares, and the treasures in the library with a rousing rendition of There's a Nightmare in Your Closet. Afterwards, I visited the Los Angeles Leadership Academy, the Excel Charter Academy, and the Milagro Elementary School to plan for Summer Reading Club promotion. After that, I came back to the library to work with the public. I helped someone apply for student aid for college. I encouraged teens to read The Lightning Thief and Twilight. I talked to a mother of an at-risk child. This child spends every hour at the library. It's like literally a second home. I mentored my teen volunteers to be on time to work and encourage good work habits. I help adults find medical information on diabetes. And, this is just the beginning. I do a lot more than this. And I really save the library. Thank you very much.
Keisha Taylor? Is that Keisha Taylor? Yes. Okay, you're next.
Hi. Ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, when you first walk into the fiction room of Teenscape in Central Library, you see a poster of Mayor Villaraigosa promoting children to read. This poster gives the impression that the mayor wants children to read, but it's ironic how that same mayor is trying to cut funds from the library. Though I'm only one person, I'm not only speaking just for myself, but for all the kids whose second home is the library. We don't have a lot, but what we have is important. Taking away funds would in turn put more kids into the street, back into trouble. Most of the children who come to the library come because we love books, the feeling of family and home, and because we love it. Cutting funds from an already broken library will be the equivalent of taking a piece of so many kids' lives and stepping it into the ground. So on behalf of the libraries, for all the libraries, cutting funds is not the way to go. Thank you.
Lee Warner, Henry Gambill, Emmy Goldknopf, Alice Goff. So that's Lee Warner. Is Lee Warner here? Okay, Lee, you're first, then Henry, then Emmy, then Alice to close.
Hi, my name's Lee Warner, and I'm a workaholic. I'm not a librarian. I'm not affiliated with a library in any way other than I'm a patron. And I do a significant amount of work there. You could call it my second home. I spend so much time working there. And the hours have already been reduced at the library I go to, and that has affected me. Believe me, I've never been to something like this. I've never done anything like this, and I wouldn't be here now if it weren't important to me. So take that into consideration. I'm just an average civilian, and I'm here to represent all those other civilians who didn't make it. Thanks.
Mr. Gambill?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Henry Gamble. I'm the young adult librarian at Palisades Branch Library. Every day, nearly every day, there's a young teenager that comes in. She's in 8th grade at Paul Revere Charter High School, and she says, "Henry, is there anything I can do for the library today?" I say, "How about your homework?" She laughs. We arrange something for her to do. She saw me the other day outside the library with a stack of petitions where I was asking our constituents to help support the library. She said, "Henry, what are those?" I explained what they were, and I said that a teen roughly her own age at the Playa Vista branch had composed his own petition for young adults and teens to support the library. She said, "Could I get signatures on those?" I said, "I would be delighted if you would." She came back the next day with 75 signatures from Paul Revere Charter High School and over 50 signatures from adults in her neighborhood. In honor of that, I would like to, since I serve the young adults in my community, I'd like to give their words here to the council very briefly. They are, "Dear Mayor Antonio Villagrosa and Los Angeles City Council members, we, the students, would like to urge you not to make cuts to the LA Public Library. In doing so, you would be impacting our education directly. We need the library. This is where we study, where we find books we need for school. We access the articles we need for our papers using the LAPL databases and get encouragement and assistance from our local librarians from everything from school projects to health issues to college application help and beyond. Being able to have a safe, quiet place to meet with our friends, study, use a computer, and volunteer is something that every teen in LA needs. We are the future leaders of this city and ask that you help us prosper by keeping the resources we have available. With all the cutbacks in education this year, don't make us suffer more. Don't mess with us anymore." Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Goldknopf, Emmy Goldknopf. And if you'd like the petitions to hand them in, the officer will take them for you and put them in as part of the official record.
Hi, council members. My name is Emmy Goldnoff. I'm actually might get upset about this. I'm a citizen of LA. I live in Echo Park in Councilman Member Garcetti's district. And I hear that you're going to cut the library budget by 11% and that you want to take supposed indirect costs from it, even though the charter says that there's certain monies that should be given to the library. And I want to ask, what about the indirect and the direct benefits of the library? Recently, I had an opportunity to visit a lot of branches of the LA Public Library, and they were all busy. Even ones that were near each other were busy. We had to wait in line to talk to a librarian about our business. I went to the Central Branch and went to the computer center at 10:20 on a day when the library had opened at 10 a.m. And it was packed, and there was a line waiting for the 15-minute where you don't have to have a library card to use the computer. The library helps unemployed people, of which, of course, there are many more now, homeless people, children. There were kids doing their homework in those libraries, people learning to read, people learning English, kids after school, as other people have said. I know a library that has a sort of gang truce so that it's a neutral ground. If you cut money for the library, are you prepared to pay for all those services for all the people who currently use them? Are you prepared to pay for the increase in crime and despair? Are you prepared to contemplate the reduction in the wonderfulness of LA and its economy that people knowing things, contributes to? I'm not speaking very grammatically, but you take my point. Don't cut the library. It lifts LA up. It lifts us all up.
Thank you. Alice Goff.
Hi, good morning. Alice Goff. I'm the president of AFSCME, Local 3090, representing the clerical and support services employees in the city of Los Angeles. The mayor's layoff list is problematic, not just in terms to our individual members and employees here in the city and the impact on their families, but for the greater good of Los Angeles itself and the loss of the services that will result. In the presentation this morning from the Office of Finance and the group working on collecting the city's debt, there were challenges that were pointed out. Well, there will be another challenge when 9 tax renewal assistants who bring in revenue to the city are laid off as part of this proposed layoff list. As the speakers from the library and the parks have said, what quality of life are we going to have in the city of Los Angeles when the parks and the libraries are cut to the extent that's being proposed? These impacts will continue for generations. There are ways to address the crisis that we are in, and my local line union, the coalition of unions, we stand ready to work with the city to get us through these very, very difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you. That marks the end of our public speaker cards. Mr. Labange.
Madam President, members, Mr. Reyes and I and Mr. Wesson, as members of the Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging Committee on Tuesday at 8:30 in the morning, welcome all of you who could come back. We have a subject focus on our library department there. It's very important that we have that information with the City Administrative Office and CLA at the table, and none of us want to see any service reduction, but there's a reality that we're dealing with. And I welcome to visit with you after this meeting and thank all of you for coming down, and thank you for the jobs, for the thousands of young people, ages 1 to 101, that you help as librarians. Thank you.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you all coming down and talking to us, because I think the answer is no. We are not prepared to deal with the unintended consequences of, shutting libraries and reducing park staff. And I don't think we are prepared for the unintended consequences. I think about the beautiful young Cheryl Green, 14-year-old African-American girl that was shot and killed. Boy, do I wish she had been in a library that afternoon, in a safe place after school where she would have been out of harm's way. And I'll tell you, I was on the Charter Reform Commission with Dennis Zine in 1997, and libraries were a key part of how we wanted to behave as a city in the future, and we guaranteed a minimum amount of funding in our city charter for our libraries. Then our voters overwhelmingly passed the library bond, which built wonderful libraries in our city. And the library department and the Bureau of Engineering was so efficient that we saved enough money to build a brand new library, and I was able to fight for a brand new library in Harbor City. That community had waited 4 years for a library. By the way, we entered into a joint use agreement with Narbonne High School on that library, where we actually have, we're allowed those students to come in during school hours in that library. We even, no offense to older people like myself, but we even got a youth librarian that was there specific, not that we older people can't communicate with young people, but specifically that's what they wanted, was a young librarian to work with these teens after school. This might be an ultimate betrayal of our public. They voted to spend money on building libraries. This high school entered into a joint use agreement on this library. Those are kind of things we have to figure out how to untangle if we begin to cut library services and lay off library employees. I think this is not the city I have ever envisioned us being, and I know we're in a tough time, and reality has hit us, very hard. I hope we can still figure out whether or not the cuts that we make will result in, expenses other places, like an increase in crime. I know I use this statistic all the time, but every gang murder processed in LA County is $1.6 million to the taxpayer. That's $2 billion a year that people, currently, or a couple years ago, were paying for crime. Seems to me I'd rather put this money on the front end in our libraries and our parks, and make sure that kids particularly have safe places to go after school. We love our libraries. I will never forget the libraries that I used to go in as a young child, how fun it was to check out a book. That was just such an important thing. My grandkids all have library cards. From the time they're 6 months old, their mothers are taking them to libraries for those reading programs with Mommy and Me programs. You all are priceless. Unfortunately, we have put a price tag on you, and the decision may be made that that price is too high. I hope not.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Mr. Cardenas is our next speaker.
I think it was in one of the earlier speakers on this item spoke to 125 positions that are identified in the mayor's proposal. I think that's what the public is speaking to. I don't want people watching the television or listening to this meeting to think that the city council has decided that we're going to reduce our personnel in our libraries by 100 and some positions. I want people to be very clear. It is a mayor's proposal. However, now it's up to the council, the legislative body of the city that actually budgets for the city of Los Angeles, for us to decide if we're going to go forward with that portion of that proposal or in any part of that proposal. Are we going to agree that 125 people who work for the libraries are no longer going to be in those positions or not? That's the decision that we have to contemplate. Those are the kinds of things that I was just sharing with one of my colleagues. I'm starting to realize I'm losing sleep these days, and I didn't know why. And yesterday I was with my wife and at my sister-in-law's birthday party, and she's saying, "What's wrong with you?" I said, I'm fine. No, I'm not, because this stuff is weighing heavily on my mind as well. So to those of you who want to put words in our mouths and think that we're callous, careless legislators, the fact of the matter is I do not believe that this is a body of callous, careless people. I think this is a body of individuals who do have brains and we do have hearts, and at the same time we are trying to figure out how to make the best of this situation. If we want to call this city a ship, the bottom line is we have a lot of responsibility around this horseshoe of managing this ship, of making sure it stays afloat. Not only that it stays afloat, that it's a quality ship, and that there's quality coming out of here, and that there's quality services being rendered to the 4 million people of the city of Los Angeles. So again, I welcome your comments. I welcome, especially I welcome your accurate comments and your feelings and your willingness to come to the podium and speak publicly before us and remind us of your perspective of what our responsibilities are. But at the same time, I want to make it very clear. What the people who came today to speak, and rightfully so, they're speaking to the proposal that the mayor's office put forward and the mayor put forward about possibly looking at as many as 125 positions within the library department. And if we were to just blanketly follow that recommendation, then they're really talking to us. But until the city council takes its own actions and does its own deliberations and makes its final decisions, I think it's inappropriate for people to accuse us of having taken an action like that. And so continue your comments, continue your prayers, or whatever it is that you do, where you try to help us make good decisions. And personally, I welcome all of that. I really do. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Madam Clerk, the action on this item? Oh, Mr. Sachs, you have 1 minute left for today.
People want to act on the mayor's proposal. Just one concrete number. How many people are being talked about laid off? 4,000, 1,000, 3,000, ERIP. How many total people are being talked about being laid off? Give us a number, Mr. Cardenas. What can be cut instead of benefits? That's the closed session item. When do we get the benefits on the table to find out what's going to happen to save positions to eliminate some benefits? The city is sinking under the benefit clause. You have too many people getting, in 10 years, your salary's doubled. The cost of running government increased at the same rate, but you had no steady stream to pay for those benefits. That's the closed session item. And somebody mentioned, congratulations to Ms. Hahn for looking at the contract, but she didn't mention charter reform.
Thank you very much. All right, Madam Clerk, the action on this item again?
No, Madam President, there's no action on this item.
Thank you. Next item?
And that clears the desk.
All right, members, are there any announcements? Any announcements? Would you please rise for adjourning motions?
Madam President, this is a special meeting, so there's no...
All right, no adjourning motions. This is a special meeting. All right, call the roll.
Cardenas, Hahn, Weezer, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Wesson.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.